Sorry, boy, but his captain's got to teach his men what happens to those what crossing.
Captain's got to teach stuff.
Good afternoon. I guess it's good evening, good night over here in Arizona from the Batcave. We are going to jump right into Daniel 9. For those of you who have been following the weekly Bible study, we're going back and forth between Daniel and Ezekiel to show how these different prophecies line up. Remember, I am saying that everything but what Daniel does in Daniel 1 through 3 is going to be before Ezekiel. Everything else is going to be after Ezekiel. So this is kind of out of order, but I'm going in the out order of the fulfillment of the prophecies, so it's more clear. If you remember from the last one, we talked about how the prophecies that were given before Belshazzar all started with Babylon and rolled forward into the Persians. Okay, so if you look at, remember the first prophecy was with Nebuchadnezzar, and it has the 4 tiers of the statue, representing 4 kingdoms, and there really is a 5th kingdom of iron and clay, but the 4th one kind of bleeds into the 5th one, which, again, if you go to the earliest church fathers who wrote on the subject, they're going to say that is the Rome eventually devolving into basically a world government of 10 democracies that are going to rule the whole world in the last days. So that's what Hippolytus of Rome believed. I think that those ideas probably came pretty early on, and it was how they understood the devolution of government from an absolute monarchy to a dual monarchy where the king is bound by his word, to basically a conquest that it quickly breaks up into 4 kings, to a Roman Republic, which was ruled by a senate and then taken over by the emperor, but he was never really an absolute monarch where he had total dictatorial control. He was always subject to the system, and then that monarchy kept getting turned over because he was more like a president, because it wasn't one line of succession. Like Constantine's going to have line for a while, you're going to have different Caesars, and it eventually turns into foreign rulers that come from, they basically become Roman citizens, but they're not really Romans anymore. So that's what they're talking about with them mingling with the seed of men, and that is the progression down. So when he gets to Daniel 7, he's talking about these same things in terms of 4 beasts, and that's going to lead into the 10-horned beast, which is basically the democracy of 10 kings that are ruling over the whole earth, and the beast is that, and then the little horn is the ruler that's different from the rest that ends up taking over the whole thing. And that seems to be the image of the beast when the Antichrist sits in the temple and claims that he's God. That's when he tries to claim the whole thing, and that last 3.5 years is when the image of the beast, which is some kind of perverse, abominable merger of him and AI, I believe, seems to rule the whole thing. So then we go to Daniel 8, and he talks about more about the little horn, but he's comparing him to a king that is actually going to be paralleled to Antiochus Epiphanes. And of course, he's talking about a ram that was broken up, and there's 4 notable ones, and out of one of them, so out of the 4 kingdoms of Alexander, there come this one king who waxed toward the south, towards the east, and towards the pleasant land, this is Antiochus Epiphanes, who is going to come from he's going to come from a kingdom that is kind of headquartered in Antioch and the region of northern Syria, but from there he is going to go over the Euphrates. He's going to take over the east, he's going to take over the south, and then he's going to take over Egypt, and that's going to foretype the Antichrist, who does something similar from a similar region. Okay, so we've kind of got this idea, and we know specifically this is Media and Persia and Greece. The 2 horns are the kings of Media and Persia, so we know these are, it's 2 kingdoms that become one kingdom, and the smaller kingdom at first, which is the Persians, becomes the dominant one, and then the Greeks come and conquer them. Okay, so we don't need to argue over what this is and if this is ancient or if this is future. It does have future connotations, which is about this little horn who comes out of that, but it's not specific. It's not mostly about the future. Most of this is historical. So after this, we're going to go to Daniel 9. And now, if you remember, Belshazzar has been overthrown by the Persians and the Medes. And Darius the Mede is basically, it says he's put over the kingdom of Babylon. And so notice this prophecy is coming in the first year of Darius, the son of Ahasuerus of the seed of the Medes. Okay? So if we go back to the historical parts, remember the first part of Daniel's book is historical narrative. The second part is just a series of prophecies. We see in Daniel 6, it talks about how Darius sets up rule over the Babylonian kingdom. So we see Belshazzar comes, and then after him, we see, it's Daniel 5 when Belshazzar is overthrown, and it says Darius the Median took the kingdom being 62 years old, so he's 62. And then in Daniel 6, we see how Darius has set up the kingdom. So Daniel gets his first prophecy in the first year of Darius. So I'm going to read this first story, which is basically Daniel in the lion's den. It doesn't seem to be right over, but Darius is only going to rule for a couple years, so all this is in pretty short succession. So it says, it pleased Darius to set over the kingdom 120 princes, which should be over the whole kingdom. So again, he's talking about the kingdom of Babylon within the wider sphere of the dominion of the Medes and Persians. And remember, they were called the King of Kings because they have other subordinate kingdoms to themselves, okay? So this is over these three presidents, of whom Daniel was first. The princes might give accounts to them that the king should have no damage. Then this Daniel was preferred above the presidents, the princesses, because of the excellent spirit that was in him. So let's get a more modern translation, because I'm sure they weren't called presidents and princes. Oh, it does say presidents and satraps. That was the satrapy is a Persian term, okay? Because an excellent spirit was in him, and the king planned to appoint him over the whole kingdom. So the presidents and satraps tried to find grounds of complaint against Daniel in connection to the whole kingdom. So remember, Daniel was kind of the right hand to Nebuchadnezzar during his reign. He's kind of faded from authority by the time of Belshazzar's reign, but he's probably still up there in the administration. And then Darius recognized him. Remember, just like Jeremiah gets favor from the Babylonians when he predicts the overthrow of Jerusalem by Babylon, these guys are probably aware that Daniel predicted the overthrow of the Babylonians by them. Okay, so he's got some favor with them. And he says there's an excellent spirit in him. Okay, so he says they were looking for a complaint against him, but they could find no grounds of complaint or any corruption because he was faithful, and no negligence or corruption could be found in him. The men said, we shall not find any ground for complaint against Daniel unless we find it in connection with the law of his God. So the presidents and the satraps conspired and came to the king and said, O King Darius, live forever. All the presidents of the kingdom, the prefects and the satraps and the counselors and the governors are agreed that the king should establish an ordinance and enforce an interdict that whoever prays to anyone, divine or human, for 30 days, except to you, O king, shall be thrown into the den of lions. Now, this is a trap that the Persian kings fall into. Remember, under their legal system, if a king gives an ordinance, he cannot change it. It's in stone. So we're going to see the same problem in Esther. So they talk him into doing this, and he says, O king, establish an interdict and sign the document so that it cannot be changed according to the law of the Medes and the Persians, which cannot be revoked. So notice he is not this is more of a republic than a true monarchy, because the law of the Medes and the Persians is really over him. So it cannot be changed, okay? Therefore, King Darius signed the document and the interdict. So these are people putting a bill in front of him that he signs that binds him to act accordingly, okay? Not a brilliant idea on his part. Although Daniel knew not that the document had been signed, he continued to go to his house, which had windows in his upper room open towards Jerusalem, and get down on his knees 3 times a day and pray to his God and praise him just as he had done previously. The conspirators came and found Daniel praying and seeking mercy before his God. Then they approached the king and said concerning the interdict, O king, did you not sign an interdict that anyone who prays to anyone, divine or human, within 30 days except you, O king, shall be thrown into the den of lions? The king answered, the thing stands fast according to the law of the Medes and Persians, which cannot be revoked. Then they responded to the king, Daniel, one of the exiles from Judah, pays no attention to you, O king, or to the interdict that you have signed, but he is saying his prayers 3 times a day. When the king heard the charge, he was very much distressed. He was determined to save Daniel, and until the sun went down, he made every effort to rescue him. Then the conspirators came to the king and said to him, Know, O king, that it is the law of the Medes and the Persians that no interdict or ordinance that the king establishes can be changed. So who are these guys? They're actually holding the king's feet to the fire over a law that he is subject to, which proves he is not the arch authority in this kingdom, okay? Then the king gave the command, and Daniel was brought down to the den of lions. The king said to Daniel, May your God, whom you faithfully serve, deliver you. A stone was brought and laid in the mouth of the den, and the king sealed it with his own signet and the signet of his lord, so that nothing might be changed concerning Daniel. Then the king went to his palace and spent the night fasting. No food was brought to him, and sleep fled from him. Then at the break of day, king got up and hurried to the den of lions. And when he came near the den where Daniel was, he cried out anxiously to Daniel, O Daniel, servant of the living God, has your God, whom you faithfully serve, been able to deliver you from the lions? And Daniel said to the king, O king, live forever. See how respectful Daniel is to these kings, even though they're like, your hands are tired. And like, this is a dumb king. Like, you let these guys throw me in a lion's den over a law that they tricked you into signing, and you can't even change it. This is pathetic. But no, Daniel's like, oh, king, live forever. He just has it. He takes down the chin with a good attitude. It's just some lions. I got this. My God has sent his angel to shut the lion's mouth so that they would not hurt me, because I was found blameless before him, and also before you, O king. I have done no wrong. So I respect God, and I respect you. How do you like that? Then the king was exceedingly glad and commanded Daniel to be taken up out of the den. So Daniel was taken up to the den, and no kind of harm was found in him, because he had trusted in his God. So this is why God exalts Daniel's name up there with Noah and Job into Ezekiel. Like, this is the kind of character that he has. It's like, even when he's getting thrown in the lion's den, he's just like, king, I respect you. Trust your judgment. Okay? My God will deliver me if he finds me worthy of it. How do you like me now? Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, same thing. But Daniel was probably a good influence on him. The king gave a command, and those who had accused Daniel were brought and thrown in the lions' dens, they and their children and their wives. Before they reached the bottom of the den, the lions overpowered them and broke all their bones to pieces. Then King Darius wrote to all the peoples and the nations of every language throughout the whole world, may you have abundant prosperity. I make a decree that in all my royal dominion people should tremble in fear before the God of Daniel, for he is a living God, enduring forever. His kingdom shall never be destroyed, and his dominion has no end. He delivers and rescues. He works and signs the wonders of heavens and earth, and he has saved Daniel from the power of the lion. So Daniel prospered during the reign of Darius and the reign of Cyrus the Persian. Okay, so Darius is the last of the Medes to seem to have this authority over Babylon, at least. And then Cyrus is going to take the authority after he dies. So you're probably in this transitional period where Cyrus has basically overcome the kingdom, but he is maintaining the rulers of the Medes kind of as puppet rulers, if you will, under his authority, and kind of shifting it towards a Persian dominance. So he's trying to keep the kingdom intact and not just have, a contest between the Medes and the Persians that goes on forever. Remember, he was married in with them, okay? So that happens probably, again, this is only 2 years that this can happen in, so we're going to assume this all happens pretty soon. Also in that year, and this is probably before the lion's den, this is in the first year of Darius, the son of Ahasuerus, by birth a Mede, who became king over the realm of the Chaldeans. Notice he is not king over all of the Medo-Persian Empire, okay? So we're not looking for a king named Darius, the son of Ahasuerus, over the entire Persian Empire. He was just king over the realm of the Chaldeans. So what the Babylonians controlled, he is basically a subject king over, okay? So in the first year of his reign, I, Daniel, perceived the book of the number of the years according to the word of the Lord to the prophet Jeremiah must be fulfilled for the devastation of Jerusalem, namely 70 years. Okay, now if you go to your authorized King James Version, which is the only Bible you should be reading if you're really a Christian, it's going to talk about Jeremiah. It says, this whole land shall be a desolation and astonishment, and these nations shall serve the king of Babylon 70 years. Well, technically, Darius is the king of Babylon now. Notice he's not saying Nebuchadnezzar for 70 years or his heirs. He's saying the king of Babylon. Well, the king of Babylon is Darius now, okay? So how long has it been? Well, we're talking probably in the 50s here, so he's only been there for like 40 years. But he was told, Jeremiah said, this whole land shall be a desolation and an astonishment, and these nations shall serve the king of Babylon 70 years. And it will come to pass, when the 70 years are accomplished, that he will punish the king of Babylon and that nation, saith the Lord, for their iniquity and the land of Chaldeans, and I will make it a perpetual desolation. Now, why is Daniel researching this? Why is he trying to figure this out? Because it hasn't been 70 years, and the king of Babylon's already gone. The king of Babylon who took them into captivity is already gone. In fact, Cyrus is going to let the Jews go free. And it hasn't even been 70 years. And he's saying, after 70 years, he's going to punish the king of Babylon and that nation, says the Lord, for their iniquity, and the land of the Chaldeans, and make it perpetual desolations. This doesn't make sense to Daniel. It's only been 40 years. The Chaldeans aren't ruling anymore. How is God going to destroy them after 70 years? This doesn't make sense. So what's going on here? Also in Jeremiah 29, it says, and after 70 years be accomplished, at Babylon I will visit you and perform my good word towards you, causing you to return to this place. So there's something going on. Well, what is the king of Babylon? Who is the king of Babylon, really? Well, we already have prophecies about the king of Babylon that seem to suggest there's a bigger picture of who this guy is than just Nebuchadnezzar or just the Chaldeans. He seems to be representative of a bigger picture Babylon and a bigger picture king of Babylon, who is ultimately Satan. Okay? So who is this that Jeremiah's going to speak about him twice, and it just doesn't work with what's going on in Daniel's history by this time. The Babylons have overthrown. There's certainly not a perpetual desolation. He's still living there. How is God going to punish the king of Babylon after 70 years and destroy these Chaldeans to become a perpetual desolation? This doesn't make any sense. So he says, I set my face on the Lord to seek by prayer and supplications with fasting and sackcloth and ashes. Daniel always goes right to prayer and supplications and fasting and sackcloth and ashes when he's trying to figure out something he doesn't know. When something doesn't make any sense to him, he just grieves over it. And he's just like, I need to figure this stuff out. All I got is like these prophecies, and I just can't understand this. This is a mess. What's going on? Lord, I need to know. I'm going to fast. I'm going to starve myself to death unless you tell me what's going on with this prophecy. And I prayed in the Lord my God, and I made my confession, and said, O Lord, O great and dreadful God, keeping the covenant and mercy to them that love him and keep his commandments, we have sinned and committed iniquity, have done wickedly and rebelled, even by departing from thy precepts and from thy judgment. Neither have we hearkened to thy servants the prophets that spake in the name of our kings and our princes and our fathers and to all the people of the land. Remember, it's 587 BC. Even if you go all the way back to Josiah, you don't have 70 years. There's no way you got 70 years, sir. So what's going on here? O Lord, righteousness belongeth to thee, but unto us confusion of faces, as at this day to the men of Judah and the inhabitants of Jerusalem, and to all Israel that are near and that are far off, though the countries whither thou hast driven them, because of their trespass that they have trespassed against me. O Lord, to us belongs confusion of face, to our kings, to our princes, to our fathers, because we have sinned against thee. To our Lord our God belong mercies and forgiveness, though we have rebelled against him. Neither have we obeyed the voice of our Lord to walk in his laws, which he set by us, which he set before us by his servants the prophets. Yea, all Israel have transgressed thy law, even by departing, that they might not obey thy voice. Therefore a curse is poured upon us, and the oath that is written in the law of Moses, the servant of God, because we have sinned against him. Now, why is he saying all this? Because in the prophecies in which they're cursed, he says, if you call out to me in the land that you've been sent away captive and acknowledge your sins, I'll bring you back. That's what he's saying. He says, and he has confirmed his words which he spake against us and against our judges that judge us by bringing upon us a great evil, for under the whole heaven has not been done up until the whole Jerusalem. As it is written in the law of Moses, all this evil has come upon us, yet made we not our prayer before the Lord our God, that we might turn from our iniquities and understand thy truth. So again, in the law of Moses, it says, if you go into captivity for all this stuff, if you turn about and you repent and you acknowledge your sin, and then you pray, I'll forgive you and bring you back from the land. And they're like, we haven't even done this. We haven't been doing the thing he said to do in the law of Moses. But they got this prophecy about 70 years. What's up with that? So, therefore the Lord has watched upon evil and brought it before us, and the Lord our God is righteous in all his works which he does, for we obeyed not his voice. In other words, we got what we deserved. And now, O Lord God, that has brought thy people forth from the land of Egypt with a mighty hand, and has gotten thee renown, as at this day we have sinned, we have done wickedly. O Lord, according to thy righteousness I beseech thee, let thine anger and thy fury be turned away from thy city Jerusalem, thy holy mountain, because of our sins and for the iniquities of our father Jerusalem, and thy people that have become reproach to all who are around us. Now, therefore, our God, hear the prayer of thy servant and his supplications, and cause thy face to shine upon thy sanctuary that is desolate for thy father's sake. So notice desolate has to do with two things: defilement and destruction. Okay, there are two kinds of desolation. There's destruction, and then there is defilement. Okay, so which one is this right here? Well, it's destruction. The temple is destroyed. That's the desolation. It says, O my God, incline thine ear and hear, and open thy eyes, and behold our desolations in the city that is called by thy name, for we not present our supplications before thee for our righteousness, but for thy great mercies. In other words, it's not because we're good that we're appealing to you for your mercy. It's because you're good. We are not. O Lord, hear. O Lord, forgive. O Lord, hearken and do. Defer not for thine own sake, O my God. For thy city and thy people are called by thy name. Now, it just so happens that Cyrus is going to set them free to go back to Jerusalem right after this. Okay? And whiles I was speaking and praying and confessing my sin, the sin of my people Israel, and presenting my supplication before the Lord, the holy mountain my God, yea, while I was speaking in prayer, even the man Gabriel, who I had seen in the vision at the beginning, so the vision at the beginning is in Daniel 8, touched me about the time of the evening oblation. Okay? Gabriel's back. Gabriel's the guy who was told to go explain the meaning of Daniel 8 to him, and now he's back. Okay? So this is remember the last one was in the third year of Belshazzar. This is now in the first year of Darius. Now this could be, depending on how you calculate this, pretty shortly after or up to maybe a decade later, okay? Depending how you calculate Belshazzar's reign. But the point is, he's saying, this is kind of the title heading of what he's saying here. Saying in the first year of his reign, I understood by books the number of years whereof the word of the Lord came to Jeremiah the prophet, that he would accomplish 70 years in the destruction of Jerusalem. Okay? So what does this mean? It means he's reading over the books, and he understands that there's going to be 7 years in the desolations of Jerusalem. So what's going on? He's praying for it. Why? 70 years haven't passed yet. This kind of doesn't make sense. But he knows the Chaldeans have been overthrown. So what's going on here? So Gabriel shows up. He's like, Daniel, Danny, my boy, you're a little confused. He says, yes, I am confused. And Gabriel informed him and talked with him and said, oh, Daniel, I am now come forth to give thee skill and understanding. He says, run it. At the beginning of thy supplications the commandment came forth, and I am come to show thee, and thou art greatly beloved. Therefore understand the matter and consider the vision. He's like, I love when you explain visions to me. It always makes more sense after you explain it. Then I end up grieved many days. So go ahead. 70 weeks. Wait. You said 70 years. Now he's on 70 weeks. Now I'm going to tell you something. There is a literal 70-year desolation of the temple in Jerusalem. Okay, you actually have 70 years from its destruction. It's 587 is the city gets breached. 586 it's destroyed. By roughly 518 is when it's finally rebuilt. Okay, so you do have just shy of 70 years that the temple is actually destroyed and the city is re-inhabited. Okay. That is literally fulfilled. It's going to happen in Ezra. We're going to show you that in a bit, okay? But what he's alluding him to is the greater meaning of this 70 years prophecy. And it turns out this word weeks is not 70 literal weeks. It's actually just says 77s. 77s. Wait, so you're saying these years are 7 years? Kind of. There's going to be a 2,000-year gap in here. But yeah, basically, okay. So he says, 70 weeks are determined on thy people in thy holy city to finish the transgression, to make an end of sins, and to make reconciliation for iniquity, and to bring in everlasting righteousness, and to seal up vision and prophecy, and to anoint the most holy. So notice all these things it says, okay? By the end of this 70 weeks, you'll have these things happen. Make an end of sins. And I got to tell you, this is coming from Jeremiah, where he talks about taking away Israel's sin in the millennium, okay? So he's making an end of sins. Notice it's like, upon thy people and thy holy city. Have sins ended in Jerusalem and in the among the Jews? Absolutely not. They are all still guilty unless they're in Christ, okay? So this is for his people. This is for Daniel's people, the Jews, okay? So to finish the transgression, now if you remember this word transgression, we want to go back and look at other uses of the word transgression that Daniel might be privy to. Remember, it's the same guy who just explained Daniel 8 to him, okay? He just told him that the host was given against him for the daily sacrifice by reason of transgression, okay? And when I heard the saint speaking, another saint said unto the saint, how long will be vision concerning the daily sacrifice and the transgression of desolation, to give the sanctuary and the host to be trodden underfoot? So the 70 weeks has to do with the finishing of the transgression of desolation, okay? This is not about putting away sin at the cross. That is not remotely what this is about. This is about when the offenses of the Jews is finally up. And that is finally up with the Antichrist and the abomination of desolation, okay? Then Christ is going to go clean house and he's going to deliver them. So what is he saying? 70 weeks are determined upon the Jews. That's Daniel's people. This is not, he's never going to say your people in regards to Christians, because there are no Christians yet, nor is Daniel ever a Christian. Okay? You need to recognize maybe Daniel is a Christian in the resurrection, but he is never a Christian because there is no Christian before God calls them Christians at Antioch in the New Testament. Okay? Nor is he following Christ, because Christ does not exist as Christ yet, except in prophecies about his future coming. Okay? The person he is, the word of the Lord is there, but Christ is the word made flesh, and he hasn't been made flesh yet. So that's who Messiah is, that's who the anointed is, and that's what Christ means. So you can't call him a Christian. Thy people is the Jews. Okay? Thy holy city is Jerusalem. To finish transgression, so this transgression has to do with the Jews in Jerusalem, to make an end of sins. So he's going to put away their sins in the millennium. This is, remember, he's reading Jeremiah, and he talks about in the same passage that's talking about the new covenant, he's going to say how this will be my covenant with them when I put away their sins. This is going to be quoted in Hebrews. And to make reconciliation for iniquity. Okay? Now what is this? Reconciliation is another way of saying atonement. So there's an atonement that has to be made. Okay? And this is the final day of atonement. This is the end times day of atonement. Then he says to bring in everlasting righteousness. Everlasting righteousness. See, he seals them by his spirit and he causes them to walk in his ways at the end of Daniel's 70th week. Now we're going to read in Zechariah that this does not apply to all Jews. It actually applies to about a third of them. It says a third are going to go into captivity, a third are going to be killed, and the third part he's going to bring through the fire, okay? So it's not every last Jew just gets a pass. These are believing Jews, but he's going to tell you about how many it is. Then he says to seal up vision and prophecy. In other words, we're done with prophesying. It's actually going to be bound. That doesn't mean there's no prophetic fulfillment after that, but nobody will be prophesying after that. And we're going to show you that in Zechariah 2 when we get there, okay? Specifically, if somebody tries to prophesy during the millennium, they are to be killed by their own family, okay? And to anoint the most holy. So when you see the most holy, that is typically a reference to the Kodesh Kodesh. That's the Holy of Holies, okay? Kodesh Kodesh is not a reference to the most holy dude. It's not a reference to Jesus being anointed at John's baptism. It's the Holy of Holies. It's anointing the Holy of Holies. Well, the Holy of Holies has to be defiled, then it's cleansed, then it's anointed. Okay? So all of this is ultimately going to lead you into Ezekiel's temple in the millennium. Okay? That's when this stuff is going to be fulfilled. So we want to know when the 70 weeks starts, and what does this mean? Because this is pretty much the only timeline prophecy in the whole Bible that gives you a timestamp for stuff, okay? And with the exception of the mystery of the church age, or the ingathering of Gentiles, which is about 2,000 years, everything else in this prophecy is lockstep on time, and I'm going to show you how accurate this is, okay? So he says 70 weeks. So therefore, he says, therefore, know therefore and understand. So he's basically telling you there are 70 weeks until the real total fulfillment of Jerusalem. You're going to have a minor type fulfillment of that in Cyrus letting them go back there, and then the temple's going to be rebuilt in 70 literal years. But the full fulfillment, remember, the whole Bible is talking in these multiple fulfillment kind of ways, okay? The full fulfillment is in the millennium. So he's telling you how many weeks, or seven times, that's what these periods are, until the millennium, okay? So he says, know therefore and understand that from the going forth of the commandment to restore and build Jerusalem unto Messiah the Prince shall be 7 weeks. Now see your little Power Bible here. See how it says Nehemiah 2 right here? This is why you want to click these links. It's so easy. When is the commandment for the going forth of the commandment to restore and build Jerusalem? Okay? Now people will be like, there's not a decree. Yes, there is a decree. When the king says to do something, that's a decree, okay? So when is that? Remember, when the Persians king gives a decree to do something, he puts it in writing, he seals it, and it's locked into law, and even he can't change it. So it's a big deal when the king says to do something. Well, in Nehemiah 2, it says, it came to pass in the month of Nisan, in the 12th year of Artaxerxes the king, the 20th year, that I was before him, and I took up wine, and I gave it to the king, and he tells him how he feels sick, and why does he feel sick? Because he says, he says, I feel sick, because why should I not my countenance be sad when the place of my father's sepulchres, this is Jerusalem, lies in waste, and the gates thereof are consumed with fire. Okay? So anyone thinks that Jerusalem, it does have some occupation to it, and they have rebuilt the temple, but not the wall. In fact, when we get into Ezra, there's this whole thing about the kings of Persia being turned away from the Jews because they're convinced by the Jews' enemies that they will try to rebel if you let them rebuild that wall. So the king says, you don't get to rebuild that city unless I give the order. Okay? Here he gives the order. So he says, what dost thou make requests? So I prayed unto the God of heaven, and I said unto the king, if it please the king, and if thy servant has found favor in thy sight, that thou wouldst send unto me to Judah, to the city of my father's sepulchres, that I may build it. Send me unto Judah, unto the city of my father's sepulchres, so Jerusalem, that I may build it. Remember, it's the decree to restore and rebuild Jerusalem. And the king said unto me, for how long shall the journey be? When will thou return? So it pleased the king to send me, and I set him a time. So he's got a deadline to do this. Why does he have a deadline to do this? Probably because the prophecy actually has times in it, okay? So it says, moreover, I said unto the king, if it please the king, let letters be given me, the governors Judah beyond the river, that they may convey me until I get to Jerusalem. And so he sent the letter to Asaph, the keeper of the king's forest, that he may give me timber. So the king orders all this. He sends him letters, he decrees it, and he says, you can go for this long, and you can go rebuild the city of Jerusalem. This is the start of the rebuilding of Jerusalem. So that's when the decree goes forth. So we have the exact month of Nisan, the 20th year of Artaxerxes. And I'm going to show you guys how to calculate this, because it's going to take you right to, and here's the amazing thing. This was the original traditional date of the crucifixion of Christ, and nobody that I've ever found in early church history made this calculation right. You have like 5 different guys trying to make this calculation, but they all have the wrong starting point or the wrong calculation, okay? So here's the thing. Now that we have all these internet resources, remember, it's going to tell you in Daniel 12 that this book is not going to be understood. It's sealed up until the time of the end when people go back and forth and knowledge increases, okay? In the first coming of Christ, the church fathers did not understand this. They knew the prophecy, and they knew it had something to do with up until the coming of Christ, but they didn't have all the information they needed to know about the Persian kingdom to know how exact this prophecy is. Now, check this out. The 20th year to Artaxerxes, okay? So if I get on Wikipedia and I go, now I can tell you how bad their knowledge of this was. The reason the Jews have a calendar that thinks it's like 5,700 from Adam instead of 6,000 years from Adam is because they truncate a whole bunch of stuff during the Persian reign because they don't have good historical records on the Persian reign. Now we do from archaeology and everything, okay? So when we look at Artaxerxes, it says he ruled from August of 465 to December of 424. Okay, so we're looking for his 20th year, and here's what you need to know. Nisan has to be in the following year because it's in the spring. So if he starts ruling in August, his 20th year, he's going to cross that, and actually you're going to have to add a year to that. So we go from 465, 20 years after that would be 445, but because Nisan is in the spring, it's Nisan of his 20th year, which means it's 444. So it's Nisan of 444, okay? So now we're going to have that as our starting date, is Nisan of 444. Now, we need to know how long a time is, okay? It doesn't say 7 years. It doesn't say weeks. It actually just says sevens, okay? But we know from later prophecies from Daniel 12 that these sevens are broken down into a time and half a time. That's one half. And then this period of like 1,290 days at the other half, okay? So we can spitball this to be, if we know what 3.5 of 1260 is, we're in about a 3.5 year period. But we need to know exactly if we're going to get this right. Well, the person who helps us get this right is the Apostle John. Because the Apostle John is going to get an additional prophecy that's going to tell you how long that time was, okay? He's not factoring Daniel. Nobody who's reading him is factoring Daniel. In fact, I think the first person to factor this out was this guy named Sir Robert Anderson, who was like the head of Scotland Yard, and I want to say he did this in like the 1700s, okay? He may have been off by a year because he didn't have that archaeological evidence. We have an Artaxerxes year that we have today. But what we have is John in Revelation 11 is going to count how long this period is. Remember, they're doing the 7 trumpets, and now they're going to bring you up to this midpoint, and we know well that this is the midpoint. He says he gives power unto his 2 witnesses that they shall prophesy 1,260 days, clothed in sackcloth. And it's going to bring you up to that, and then you're going to have the Jews fleeing in Jerusalem, which we know happens in Daniel 12, And then in Revelation 13, we're going to have the abomination of desolation being set up. So we know this is bringing you up to the midpoint. We've got the witnesses for this. But if we get 1,203 score days, and we know that's 3.5 years based on Daniel, we go this. 1,203 score is actually 60, okay? And then we divide that by 3.5, and what you have is 360. That's how long a time is. A time also was the official count of a year in Babylon, which is where they were. Okay, so there's actually the only guy I found in the ancient church who calculates this from the right starting point is his name is Julius Sextus Africanus, who writes this chronography of the world. Okay, he has the right starting point, but he is using the Jewish count of a 354-day year, which doesn't make sense, when he should know, because of the revelation here, that 360 is the if you want to summarize the year count. So these times, and half a times, a time, and that's always what they call it. They call it a 7 or a time. They never say year, okay? The time that it is a 360-day count, and we have this by divine revelation, okay? The Jews didn't have this. We don't have this until the end of the New Testament is written, officially from God, okay? So we know that a time is 360 days. So this is important. We want to sit there and go, he says there's going to be, watch what he says in the prophecy. He says, first he says, know therefore and understand that from the going forth of the commandment to restore and build Jerusalem, which is 444 BC in Nisan, unto Messiah the Prince shall be 7 weeks and 62 weeks. So what's that total? 69 weeks, okay? Why do they break it up into 7 and 62? I really don't know. I think it could have to do with the temple's construction, but it says from here to here is going to be 7 and 62. Maybe he slaps a 7 in there because they just like 7s. But what I know is it's from here to here, there's 7 weeks and 62 weeks. So 77 plus 62 is 69, okay? So if we go to 69 times 360, we have this many days, okay? Remember, we're starting in Nisan of 444. Now, what I want to do to take that into its calendric year is I want to divide that by a normal calendar count, and that is going to be divided by 365.24. That's how long an actual solar cycle is, okay? And what I get, oops. I'm sorry, I got to multiply it by 7 first. So I've got 360 times 7 times 69. That's how many 7s there are. And I get 173,880. Then I divide that by 365.24. That's how long a solar cycle is. And what I have is 476 years. Now I want to do one more thing, because we're going to cross over from BC and AD. And because those calendric counts don't count a year 0, I have to add a year. Okay? So I'm going to add 1 year. Plus 1. And I got 477, okay? So, now I got to get my starting point. It's Nisan of 444 BC, okay? So I'm going to take this and I'm going to subtract from it 444. And what do I get? 33 AD and some change. Okay? 33 AD and some change, okay? So, when is Jesus crucified? Remember, this starts on Nisan of 444. This is going to take me to Nisan and some change of 33 AD. Now, I don't know if this is going to be exactly today, but I'm just going to take this 0.07 and divide that, because it's going to be, I think I divide that into 365.24. And it's about less than 1/10 of a year. So it's within that month. And I end up in the same month that Jesus is crucified, 33 AD. Now, maybe you can get this closer. Maybe there's something a little closer to the solar calendar and stuff that I don't understand, that you can get it right down to the day. but I can get it to within the month that Christ is crucified, just using John's 360-day count, which everyone in the early church said that was about Daniel's 70th week. Nehemiah 2, which gives you my starting point. Your common records that are right up there on Wikipedia about when Artaxerxes ruled, and the actual math God gives you in Daniel's 70th week prophecy. It takes you to the month of Christ's crucifixion. Okay? Why did the Jews get this wrong? They had the wrong year count, which John the Apostle had, because Sextus Africanus used the Jewish year count instead of the Babylonian year count, which Daniel's in Babylon. All his prophecies are in Babylon, and that's the year count they would have been using the whole era this is given. Okay? So, this prophecy, it says, from the command to rebuild Jerusalem until Messiah the Prince, gives you that much time. And then he says, the street shall be built again, and the wall, even in troublous times. That's basically describing the book of Nehemiah, which is going to be roughly 50 years after this, ballpark, okay? Then he says, after 62 weeks shall Messiah be cut off, okay? So it's going to be 7 weeks and then 62 weeks. So after the 62 weeks, Messiah will be cut off. So it takes you right to the time of his crucifixion, but not for himself. He doesn't do anything wrong. It's not his sins he's being cut off for. It's our sins. And the people of the prince that shall come shall destroy the city and the sanctuary. Okay? The people of the prince that shall come shall destroy the city and the sanctuary. Now, most of your traditional commentators would be like, well, that has to be the Romans because the Romans destroyed it. No, a Roman general was leading the siege of Jerusalem, but he didn't order the destruction of the sanctuary. The people who were in his legions did, and we need to know where they're from. Notice he says, the people of the prince that shall come shall destroy the city and the sanctuary, okay? So we're going to look at the siege of Jerusalem in 70 AD, okay? And we want to know whose legions are involved in this. And it says this is Titus's campaign when he destroys it. It says his forces included the legions previously commanded by Vespasian. The 5th legion, which is Macedonia. The 6th, which is Hortensius. The 10th, which is Hortensius. The 15th, which is Apollinarius. The 12th, which is Fulminata, which is suffered to be in 66 CE. Additional support came from Depassions of the Cyrenica, so that's from Cyrene, the Dietaria regions from Egypt, 20 infantry cohorts, 8 cavalry lay, Syrian irregulars, and auxiliaries from vassal kings, according to Tacitus, a strong force of Arabs, driven by long-standing enmity to the Jews, also joined the campaigns. This combined force, estimated at 48,200 soldiers, was significantly larger than the one deployed for the invasion of Britain in 43 CE. Okay? So this is who it is. So the legion who was responsible for destroying and dismantling the temple, remember it says the city and the sanctuary will be destroyed. The main one who's left behind at the end is the Legio X Hortensius. Okay? The legion that was primarily responsible for the destruction of Jerusalem came from, it says, this town called Cyrus. That's where they were stationed, which means they're probably going to have more and more recruits from that local area. Remember, these legions weren't all made up of Roman soldiers. In fact, you would want to get into a legion to earn your Roman citizenship. So these legions would have had a lot of locals in their legion. And this legion was stationed at Cyrus, which is 60 miles northeast of Antioch. Okay? So the legion, if you look at the area right here, is basically right up in this area of Turkey. It's right on the border of Turkey. Turkey has this one part that comes down, if you see this gray line right here. And it's right in this area of Turkey, right on the border of Turkey and Syria. That's where it is. Which is right in the core of Antiochus Epiphanes' territory. So that is where the legion comes from that destroys the Jews. Which means you probably have people in that legion who are actually descended from Antiochus and his nobility, because this would have been their core territory of the Greeks, okay? So that's the main one. Again, that legion is known as the 10th Legion Hortensius. And if you read about the siege of Jerusalem, the 10th Fretensis is believed to be the one who tore down the stones of the temple. They were the final ones there in the destruction of it. There were obviously other people around and involved with it, including Arabs. But the 10th Legion was the main legion that's entering in Jerusalem, destroying the city, destroying the temple, and tearing down its stone walls. Now, this is all important because all this stuff about how one stone is not left upon another is specific to Christ's prophecy, which is based on this line right here. Remember, the prince shall come after the Messiah is cut off. Well, what does he say days before he's killed? That the city is going to be destroyed and not one stone is left upon the other. So who do they believe is responsible for tearing down these stones? This is the 10th Legion Fretensis, which is from the region around Antioch. That's where their base is, okay? It's not in Antioch, the city. It's 60 miles away, okay? And then he says, the end thereof shall be with a flood, and unto the end of the war desolations are determined. So we see now this connection between this people who destroy Jerusalem and Antiochus' kingdom. And they're from that region, okay? So he says, and unto the end of the war desolations are determined. Now remember, desolations can mean defilement or it can mean destruction. So we know it's desolation because the temple is destroyed, it's desolated. The city is destroyed, it's desolated. There's a number of other cities that are destroyed, including Qumran. Ultimately, it ends with Masada, and I think that's the final destruction around 130. But this is basically the end of the war ends with the entire expulsion of the Jewish people from the land of Judea. So it really is a war that starts in the 60s AD, and then it dies down about the early 70s AD when after Jerusalem is destroyed. Then it picks up again about 50 years later, and then they completely eliminate them there, okay? So this end of the war, these desolations are probably at the end of the Jewish revolts that end in the early, I think it's like 73 AD. I think somebody's done the calculation. There's about a 7-year period of these wars here. But this is something different, okay? Now notice he says, the people of the prince that shall come. Well, the people who destroy the city and the sanctuary come from the region around where Antiochus is. So we have Syria and Turkey. That's that region, okay? So those people now is where the prince that shall come should be. So Messiah is a different person. See, notice we have until Messiah the prince. That's the Christ. This other prince that shall come is the Antichrist. Because Christ is going to say, I came in my Father's name, me you did not receive. Another will come in his own name, him you will receive. So this is Christ. Messiah is cut off. Then the people of the prince that shall come, the prince that shall come is Antichrist, okay? Some people are going to try to say, oh, because prince and prince are used, it has to be the same person. No, because this is after Messiah is cut off when the people of the prince that come destroy the city and the sanctuary, okay? And it certainly is not the people of Christ, the Christians, that destroy the city and the sanctuary. It's not the Jews that destroy the city and the sanctuary. It is this 10th Legion Fretensis that does this, okay? So now, he, that's the prince that shall come, shall confirm a covenant with many for 1 week. That's the last of Daniel's 70 weeks. Remember, he's just given you 69 weeks. This is the last one. And in the midst of the week, he shall cause the sacrifice and oblation to cease. And for the overspreading of abominations, he shall make it desolate, even until the consummation, and that determined shall be poured on the desolate. So notice these key terms. First of all, we have the overspreading of abominations. Well, why does he use this overspreading? Well, this term, if we look at it, kanaf is an edge or extremity, specifically a wing, a flap, a quarter, a bird, a board, a feather. So you'll see some say on the wing of abomination. It could also be the extreme abomination. That is a possible translation because an edge or extreme can be kanaf, okay? Or it could be this overspreading of abomination. Well, what does wings and overspreading remind you of? Well, remember how Christ said, I would have gathered you as chicks, like a hen gathers chicks under her net. And he keeps having these prophecies in the Old Testament about spreading his wings over Jerusalem and protecting them from what's coming. So there's a different kind of overspreading happening. It's not that. It's an overspreading of abomination. So what we're seeing here is an antichrist spreading his wings over the Jews to protect him. So it's like an anti-church. Well, if Christ spreading his wings over us is like us being covered or clothed in Christ to become the body of Christ, this overspreading of abomination is them becoming the body of Antichrist, okay? That's what he's trying to do. It's the anti-church that he's creating, okay? So, we have, in the midst of the week, he causes the sacrifice and oblation to cease. And for the overspreading of abominations, so this is him claiming that he's the Christ and he's going to save them, he shall make it desolate. What is he going to make desolate? He says they're going to destroy the city and the sanctuary. He shall confirm the covenant for many with 1 week. And in the midst of the week, he shall cause the sacrifice and oblation to cease. And for the overspreading of abominations, he shall make it desolate. So this is implied. What is it? It's the sanctuary. He's making the sanctuary desolate. Okay. Even until the consummation. Remember how we talked about in Daniel 8, how it talks about the whole time of this 2,300 days of this defilement that's going on, partly because of the sacrifices that are not authorized, and partly because of his abomination of desolation. It's 2,300 days. He says, until the consummation, and that determined shall be poured out on the desolate. Okay? So when he says he shall make desolate, what is the desolate? Is that the desolate one? Let's see. Daniel 9:27. Until the decreed destruction is poured out upon Chal, to stun, devastate, stupefy. So this is the desolate one, okay? So if you see Kala's destruction, Kal is Somem. Misomem, okay? So this is the abomination that causes desolation, so Misomem. The abomination of desolation is poured out on the desolate one, okay? So what is being poured out on him? These are going to be the bowls of the Lord's wrath being poured out on him and his kingdom. Remember, his kingdom is overspread over the people in the same way that Christ is covering the Jews. He's actually going to be down in his kingdom at the end of this, covering the Jews over the Basra, and he's spreading his wings over them. But the Antichrist is claiming to spread his wings over his kingdom and protect him from the Lord. He's standing up to the Prince of the Host. He's like, I am their Messiah. I am the one who's going to protect them. They're my dominion. I'll fight you. This is what he's saying, okay? So the destruction, notice it says the consumption, annihilation, complete destruction, until the decreed destruction, Kala. What we have here is consummation. You say a completion, a destruction. So it's basically a consumption or consummation, a complete destruction, okay? So this term, Kala, where is this going to be in something that Daniel has reference to? Well, it's going to be... So there's a similar word used in Isaiah. Notice the root word is kala, and this is kelion. This for consumption in Isaiah 10:22, 10:23, and Isaiah 28. Okay. Notice in Isaiah 28, he says, "Now therefore be not mockers, let your bands be made strong, for I, the Lord, your God of hosts, a consummation even determined upon the whole earth." This is going to be referenced by Paul in Romans 9, and he's referring to the destruction of Jerusalem that's coming in his day. But you have the same thing in Isaiah 10, where he's going to say, "The remnant shall return, even the remnant of Jacob, unto the mighty God. For though thy people Israel shall be as the sand of the sea, yet a remnant shall return." The consumption or consummation, so notice that word is kela, and this word is going to be kilion, which is going to be a derivative of that word. Decreed shall the consumption decreed shall overflow with righteousness or justice, okay? So something is going to be overflowing or poured out. So in other words, the wrath of God is going to be justly poured out. For the Lord of hosts shall make a consumption, a kalah, see, there's that word again, even determined in the midst of all the land, okay? So this is the same thing that is described in Isaiah is what Daniel is referring to. There's the consumption that is poured out in the land of Israel on the Antichrist kingdom. So it's important to know that what is the subject of all this stuff? It's not the whole world necessarily, although the world is going to be caught up in it, but it is after your people and your holy city, okay? So he's ruling from Jerusalem over the whole world, and this consummation or this kalah is being poured out on him. So this is the same one from Isaiah 28 and 10, okay? And he says, that determined shall be poured out on the desolate one. So again, he is their spiritual covering because of the mark of the beast, and the wrath is being poured out on him and whoever's taken his mark. Just like we have the righteousness of Christ, they have the curse of Antichrist, okay? So it's him that the wrath is being poured out on, but they have placed themselves under his wing. He has an overspreading of abominations. He has an abominable covering over them, okay? And that is going to be the mark of the beast, okay? So how do we know this is the mark of the beast? When we get into Revelation, we'll explain all this stuff. It's going to allude back to this. But this is the meaning of this prophecy. Now we're going to go to the next prophecy, and we're going to elaborate on this stuff from this prophecy, okay? So now we are in it says the 3rd year of Cyrus, the king of Persia. So remember, Darius is just going to rule for 2 years. Now he's in the 3rd year of Cyrus. This is probably at most 4 years later than he gets this prophecy, okay? He says, a thing was revealed unto Daniel, whose name was called Belteshazzar, and the thing was true, but the time appointed was long, and he understood the thing and had understanding of the vision. Now, I just happened to have taken this prophecy because I really wanted to understand. I had never really worked on understanding all the details of how this is fulfilled in the ancient past. And so I went and just interpreted the whole prophecy and went through all these kings of the Seleucids and the Ptolemies to understand what happened in their history so that I can understand the full thing and the fulfillment of this. So we're going to skip right to my translation here, and we're going to go to the Power Bible when it is convenient for explanation, okay? So Daniel 10 through 12. This is all one prophecy, Daniel 10 through 12, and I'm just going to read it to you how I understand it, and then we're going to go through the history and show you how this is, because I have the history interspersed in here, okay? So this is in the 3rd year of Cyrus, king of Persia, and that's 527. Something was revealed to Daniel, whose name was called Belteshazzar, and the thing was true, but the appointed time was long. In other words, he's saying the prophecy that Daniel was given, whoever wrote this and collected Daniel's prophecies, is saying the prophecy was true, but the time appointed was long. In other words, it took place over a long time, okay? And he understood the word, and having received understanding of the vision. In those days, now this is Daniel speaking firsthand, okay? In those days, I, Daniel, was mourning 3 full weeks. I did not want to eat any bread, nor did any meat or wine enter my mouth, nor did I anoint myself for the entire 3 weeks. Then in the 24th day of the month, I was beside the river Hiddekel, which is a river, well, let's actually look at the Hiddekel. I think that might be the same river I think it's the Tigris River. Yeah, it is. Okay, so he's beside the Tigris River when he gives this prophecy. And he says, I lifted up my eyes and looked, and behold, a man clothed in fine linen, whose loins were girded with fine gold of Uphaz, and his body was like beryl, his face like lightning, his eyes like flaming lamps, his arms and feet were like polished brass in color, and the words like the voice of a multitude. So this is very similar to the angelic messenger that speaks to John in the book of Revelation. Now, at multiple times in this vision and Revelation, John tries to bow down to this angelic messenger who is speaking firsthand for the Lord, and the messenger corrects him and says not to bow down to him, worship the Lord. So whoever this person is, it doesn't seem to be Jesus, but it seems to be an angelic representative of Jesus, okay? Because he's specifically not told not to bow down to him, and Jesus actually receives worship. So and he says, Then I, Daniel, alone saw the vision, and the men that were with me did not see the vision, but instead a great trembling came upon them, so that they fled and hid themselves, to hide themselves. So I was left alone, and I saw the great vision, and there was no strength remaining in me, for my glory turned to corruption, and I retained no energy. Yet I heard the sound of his words, and when I heard the sound of his words, I fell on my face into a deep sleep with my face against the ground. So notice how similar this is to Ezekiel's prophecies. Remember how Ezekiel is having his prophecies, and he's falling down and fainting too. So he talks about how his feet, let's see, were the color of burnished brass. No, I'm sorry. John in Revelation chapter 1, same thing when he sees a guy that looks just like him. He says, when I saw him, I fell at his feet as if dead. And the angel is speaking first person as if Christ, but by the end of it, and I'll correct myself if I'm mistaken later, it seems to be the same angel is saying that when I saw these things, I fell down to worship before the feet of the angel which showed me these things. Then he said to me, see that you do it not, for I am thy fellow servant and thy brethren are the prophets that keep the sayings of the book. And he said to me, seal not the sayings of the prophecies, for the time is at hand. And then he continues on to say, behold, I come quickly, and my reward is with me, to give every man according to his work shall be. I am the Alpha and Omega, the beginning and the end. So it doesn't say that another person is saying this, okay? What it seems to be is this angel is speaking first person for Christ, but he's like a prophet who is speaking for Christ. He is not Christ himself. And so they fall down at worshiping him, and he resembles Christ typologically in his imagery and stuff like this, but he's not actually Christ. And so when he's saying, I come quickly, the same person is saying, I am of your fellow servants, the prophets, worship God. Okay? So this seems to be the exact same angel that Daniel sees, that John sees in the book of Revelation. And what he tells him, says he fell into a deep sleep with his face towards the ground. Then behold, a hand touched me and roused me to my knees and the palms of my hands, and said to me, O Daniel, man dearly beloved, understand the words that I speak to you and stand up, for to you I have been sent. And when he had spoken this word to me, I stood trembling. Then he said, fear not, Daniel, for the first day you set your heart, I said your heart to understand, even chastening yourself before God, your words were heard, and I have come because of your words. So Daniel's fasting and praying, trying to understand stuff again, and he's coming because of that. But the prince of the kingdom of Persia resisted me for 21 days. Yet behold, Michael, one of the chief princes, came to help me. And I remained there with the kings of Persia. Now I have come to make you understand what will happen to your people, again, this is the Jews, in the latter days, for the vision is still regarding many days. So he's telling him this is for the Jews in the latter days. Now remember, he's already given him this 70 weeks prophecy, okay? It doesn't say specifically that this is Gabriel, but every time somebody comes to explain the vision to Daniel, it's Gabriel. So I'm assuming this is Gabriel too, okay? Now there's somebody else here who seems to be the Lord. Okay, now this is what he says. Now I've come to make you understand what will happen to your people in the latter days, for the vision is still regarding many days. And when he had spoken these words to me, I turned my face towards the ground and became dumbfounded. Then behold, one in the form of the sons of man touched my lips. Now this seems to be somebody different than the initial angel. One in the form of the sons of man. That's what he's saying. So somebody who looks like a human being. This guy looks like a crazy angel made of metal and stuff, okay? Fiery lightning face and all kinds of stuff, okay? This guy seems to seem like a regular guy. And he seems to strengthen him to be able to stand up. And that's why I think this is the Lord. And then I opened my mouth and spoke and said to him who stood before me, O my Lord, by the vision sorrow has come over me, and I have no strength less. For how can such a servant of my Lord speak with one like my Lord? As for me, there is now no strength left in me, nor is any breath left in me. Then the one that looked like a man came and touched me, and he strengthened me. And he said, O dearly beloved man, do not fear. Peace be unto you. Be strong, yea, be strong. And when he had spoke to me, and I was strengthened, and said, May my Lord speak, for you have strengthened me. So, again, this seems like two different people. Now, I could be mistaken, and it's just lost in translation, and it really just is the same person. But he's describing what he sees, and he sees a man clothed in fine linen, and one in the form of the Son of Man. It might just be the one in the form of the Sons of Man. So the man clothed in fine linen might be the same guy, okay? If I'm mistaken, I'm mistaken. But the point is this person touches him, strengthens him, and now he's able to stand and he's able to think and hear and understand the vision. And then he said, Do you know why I've come to you? Even now I will return to fight with the prince of Persia, and when I have left, behold, the prince of Grecia will come. But I will show you what is noted in the book of truth, And no one restrains. You're going to see this word shazak, which just means to hold or restrain. So it's somebody restricting in order to see God's things fulfilled. Okay? So no one restrains these things with me except Michael, your prince, even in the first year of Darius the Mede. Remember, Daniel served under Darius the Mede, and he would have just died in the past few years. He said, even in the first year of Darius the Mede, I arose to strengthen and defend him. And now I will show you the truth. Okay? So whoever this guy is, he strengthened and defended Darius the Mede while he was being placed over Daniel as king. So he is involved in these rising and falling of kingdoms. Okay? Now, this is either the angel of the Lord or Gabriel. Again, there could be two people present, who's also mentioning Michael, or Gabriel, but there's a total of 3 people in this vision. Okay, that's what we know for certain. So he said, so now here is he says, I will show you the truth. This is the truth of this vision. He says, behold, 3 kings shall yet arise in Persia, and the 4th will be far richer than all of them. So we'll start with this. The 3 kings, notice it says, shall yet arise in Persia. Cyrus is already there, so that's king 1. But there's 3 kings after him before we get to this next one. And that's going to be perfectly fulfilled. We're not going to know this until modern times when we discover a 3rd king named Bardia. So the ancient church is going to have a different interpretation. And he says, and when he has strengthened himself by his riches, he will stir up the whole king of Javan. That's the ancient Hebrew name for Greece, the Greek peoples, okay? Javan is transliterated to Ion, which is Ionia, and that's where the Greeks come from. So that was Western Turkey, but then they're going to spread from there all into the Greek islands and Achaia and Peloponnese and all that. So it says he will stir up the whole kingdom of Javan. So who is this king who stirs up the whole kingdom of Javan? That is going to be Artaxerxes. So if you look up on Wikipedia Cyrus, Cyrus the Great. After him is going to come his son Cambyses. So notice the successor is Cambyses II. After him is going to be this Bardia, who's just going to rule for a year. And then after him is Darius the Great. So there's 3 kings that stand up after him. And then the 4th is Xerxes. And he's more powerful than all of them. Because remember how we talk about the 3 ribs in the mouth of the thing, representing the 3 major campaigns of Cyrus, Cambyses, and Darius, which make the kingdom its maximum size. Okay, so now Xerxes is going to be the 4th king from Cyrus, and he is going to inherit the king at its maximum size and strength, richer than it's ever been before. And he's going to decide to go pick a fight with the Greeks. He's going to invade the Greeks. He's going to burn Athens. He's going to, I think he's going to lose at Thermopylae. A small force of Greek warriors led by King Leonidas of Sparta, so this is where the 300 are, resisted much larger Persian forces, were ultimately defeated. According to Herodotus, the Persians broke the Spartan phalanx after a Greek man called Ephialtes betrayed his country by telling the Persians of another pass around the mountains. At Artemisium, large storms had destroyed the ships on the Greek sides. The battle stopped prematurely, and the Greeks received news of the defeat at Thermopylae and retreated. After Thermopylae, Athens was captured. Most of the Athenians had abandoned the city and fled to the island of Salamis before Xerxes arrived. A small group attempted to defend the Athenian Acropolis, and they were defeated. Xerxes ordered the destruction of Athens and burnt the city, leaving archaeological attested destruction later, known as the Parachute. The Persians thus gained control of mainland Greece and the islands of the Isthmus of Corinth. Okay, so they have basically conquered Greece at this point. Now, this is what stirs up the Greeks. But the Greeks are going to ultimately make a comeback, and they're going to push the Persians out. And this is going to be, notice the timing of this, 483. Alexander the Great is going to come, it's over 100 years later, okay? But that's what stirs up the Greeks to start to unite their forces against the Persians. And when somebody goes and gets these Greek city-states who are all really tough and warring to all unite as a single force, they're going to go in there and kick the Persians' butt. Okay? So, it's that 4th kingdom. It says, the mighty king shall arise Oh, I'm sorry. He's going to stir up the whole kingdom of Javan. Okay. So the point is that is when. Remember how he's saying, I am going to go to Greece and I'm going to raise up the Greeks against the Persians. Okay. So it's the fight that is stirred up by Artaxerxes that begins the fights between the Greeks and the Persians. Then a mighty king shall arise. This is Alexander the Great, 100 years later, who shall rule with great authority and do according to his will. Yet when he is arisen, his kingdom shall be broken and divided towards the four winds of heaven. So we already know who this is because we have the prophecy of the he-goat who has, and the leopard. We have the leopard with the four wings and the four heads, and then we have the he-goat with the one horn that falls and then four horns arise in its place. We already know this is the Greeks. So we know this is the Persians and the Greeks, and this is the same kingdom whose horn is broken, and then four kingdoms rise in its place. So we don't need to be mysterious about trying to figure out who this is. This is not about modern times. This is the exact same prophetic idea that they have in the leopard, in the he-goat, and now again in a third prophecy, okay? And it says, his kingdom shall be broken and divided towards the four winds of heaven, but not to his posterity, nor according to his authority by which he ruled, for his kingdom shall be uprooted for others besides these. Now, a point should be made here, and some people will argue that, well, there's not exactly four kings. Well, there are four dominions, and they're going to shift hands between different kings, and during those warring periods, it's not going to be an overnight thing, but there tends to be, when you see Alexander's empire, this general division that persists, which is going to be Lysimachus, Seleucus, Ptolemy, and over here is Antigonus. And I forget one of these guys, Cassander, is going to take over one of these, and I think it's Antigonus. I don't think it lasts that long. I think Cassander takes it over. But you basically have, notice you have the Attalids here too. The Ptolemies, the Seleucids, Antagonids, Attalids. You're going to have different royal dynasties over them, but there's always going to be these four basic dominions, and their lands are going to change size and over time, and they're going to win and lose lands from each other. But the four basic dominions are essentially this Macedonia down through Greek, this Greek down through Western Turkey, then Eastern Turkey to this whole all the way out to Persia and India, and then this Egyptian sphere. That is the basic breakdown of these four kingdoms, okay? So you're going to see different maps and different representations of these kingdoms because they're going to expand and contract. They're all going to have rebellions and stuff that happen throughout their kingdom. But these are the main four divisions. Notice you have the Indian Mauryan Empire. This is the Seleucid Empire, Lysimachus, Cassander, and Ptolemy. Those are the main four, okay? And so there's your four generals, the four heads of the four of the leopard and the four horns of the goat, and they end up being basically four dominions. And then it says it's not going to be to his posterity because his descendants aren't going to rule any of these. They're going to actually have his descendants killed, and it's going to be the descendants of these four generals or their competitors who overthrow them that are going to rule. And the most persistent of the two are the Seleucids and the Ptolemies, who those two families stay in power in their dominions the whole time, okay? And so everything in this prophecy is about the two most powerful, which is essentially the Greeks and the Syrians. Those are the main two most powerful kingdoms. So it says, it's not to his posterity, nor according to the authority with which he ruled. In other words, no one will have his entire dominion ever, for his kingdom shall be uprooted for others besides these. So others besides his posterity, his descendants. And then he says, and the king of the south shall be powerful, yet one of his princes shall be more powerful than he, and he shall rule a great dominion by his authority. And at the end of his years, they shall join themselves together. So what this is the king of the south is Ptolemy the first. And then at the end of his reign, he's going to appoint his son, Ptolemy the second, to take over. And Ptolemy the second, at the end of his reign, is going to try to unite the main two most powerful kingdoms in a bid to unite these two bloodlines of these two generals in order to eventually have Alexander's whole empire. Okay, so Ptolemy the second is going to send his daughter up to these other kings who are over here across the Euphrates of the Seleucids and try to marry them together. And so he says, he shall rule a great dominion by his authority. So that just so you see how big his kingdom was. Ptolemy II's kingdom here is going to be all of Egypt here. It's going to be all the way down to the borders of Cush, all the way over here into Cyrene, which is basically parts of Libya today. It's going to control all of Judea, all the way up to Damascus. It's going to control parts of southern Turkey. It's going to control Cyprus. It's going to control parts of Crete and parts of western Asia. All this up here in the purple is all his kingdom. Okay, he's going to have a lot of stuff. And it's at this point, notice he's already got domains all the way up in here into Greece. If he marries in and gets his daughter to marry in with the Seleucids and gets their armies under his authority, then he's going to end up being able to claim the whole thing, and he almost does. And so what it's going to say there is that he shall rule a great dominion by his authority, and at the end of this years, they shall join themselves together. In other words, there seems to be a plan to join these kingdoms together into one authority, but it doesn't work out. It says, for the daughter of the king of the south shall come to the king of the north and make a covenant. That's a marriage covenant. But she shall not retain the power of the army, nor shall he arise, nor his army. In other words, she's going to marry into that kingdom, but she's never going to get power over their army, nor is he going to arise and conquer them or his army. Rather, she shall be delivered up with those that bought her, and he that begot her, and he that cleaved to her at that time. So what does that mean? It means she's going to die. Her entourage that came with her is going to die. Her father is going to die, and then he that cleaved to her, the descendant of Seleucid who's married in with her, he's going to die all in 1 year. That's what happens. That's why this doesn't work out. So what's going to happen is when we get to Bernice of Syria is her name. That's his daughter. She is going to marry Antiochus II. Okay, so everybody in the Seleucid dynasty is either named, the main guys are either named Seleucus or Antiochus. Okay, this all goes back to the fact that when these two marry, they're going to have a son together, and her son is going to be named Antiochus. And this guy's former wife, her name is Laodicea, is going to have a son named Seleucus. This is why you keep having Seleucus and Antiochus in this line, okay? When they're making a decision to unite these two kingdoms, one of the contingencies is that he says he needs to divorce his former wife, which is this woman named Laodicea. And the reason he needs to divorce her is they want to ensure that the heir to this throne is descended from Ptolemy and Seleucus through his daughter, okay? So he gives his daughter to them in marriage, but the assurances is that it's going to be an heir that is going to be a union of their two kingdoms, okay? And what ends up happening is Laodicea has her husband murdered, then he has Bernice murdered, then he has their kid murdered. And it just so happens the same year he does this, Ptolemy II just dies of old age, okay? So all this happens in 1 year, and they all end up dead. So what ends up happening after this, it says, so she shall not retain the power of the army, nor shall he arise, nor his army. Rather, she shall be delivered up with those that brought her, he that begot her, and he that cleaved to her at that time. So her father, her husband, her entourage, and her son are all dead. Okay? And what ends up happening is basically Ptolemy III, who is her brother, goes to invade Syria to try to rescue her, because he knows once her husband is killed, they're going to come for my sister, they're going to kill her too, because it's a fight between her two wives basically and their sons over who's going to take the throne. And so he knows they're coming for her, so he raises an army to go get her, but she's dead by the time he gets here. So he trashes all of Syria. He's going to take it over, but revolts in Egypt force him to go back. Okay, so this is what it says after this. So from the branch of her roots, this is her brother. Remember, it's her roots, so that's her father. A branch of her roots, that's her brother. One shall stand up in his estate. So this is Ptolemy III, standing up in the estate of Ptolemy II. And you want to pay attention to this term, his estate. That means who is going to reign over his dominion after him. Okay? And he shall come with an army, and he shall enter into the stronghold of the king of the north, and shall advance against him. Now, whenever you see the stronghold, That means their core territory of their dominion, okay? He shall advance against them and conquer, and he shall even carry captive to Egypt their goods and princes and precious vessels and silver and gold. And he shall remain for years after the king of the north, but the king of the south shall depart and return to his own land. So he does end up outliving the king of the north. So remember, her husband dies, and then the son, basically the rival son to his sister's son, who had his sister and her son killed, he ends up on the throne. But the king of the south outlives him by 3 years. So notice he says he shall remain years after the king of the north, but he shall depart and return to his own land. In other words, he could have conquered them, but he had to return to his own land, so he didn't conquer them. But he does outlive him, okay? So this is Ptolemy the Third invades Syria. Notice he dies in 22. Seleucus is going to die in 25, so he outlives him by 3 years, okay? But the king, when this prophecy goes, it talks about the he and his, and you have to be very careful to see who they're talking about. And his is the king of the north. So the king of the north's son shall be stirred up and shall assemble a great multitude and a great force, and they shall overflow and pass over. You want to pay attention to this term. So the king of the north is going to be Seleucus. I think it's Seleucus the third. He's going to have 2 sons in a row. The first one's going to rule for like 3 years, raise up his armies, and put down some rebellions locally. The second son is going to invade the territory of, they call it Soel, Syria, and it's basically the Levant. And this is going to be a major bone of contention between the two over this. It's this area over here that they're fighting over for generations, okay? And so when it says they overflow and pass over, what it means is this: their core of their territory is up here between the Tigris and Euphrates. They are going to, notice you see Seleucia right here, you see Babylon right here, Antioch right here. So these are all capitals, but they're basically along the Euphrates. And when they overflow and pass over, that means they're going to pour their armies from their core over the Euphrates River and go down and try to invade this. That's what overflow and pass over means. And so what is going to happen is the second son is going to overflow and pass over, and it says, then he shall return and be stirred up in his own stronghold. So after he overflows and pass over, he's going to take over a bunch of his turf, but then he's going to be pulled back by rebellions in his own kingdom. So that's why it says he shall return and be stirred up in his own stronghold, okay? So Seleucus the third would be immediately build up the armies to take Soel, Syria from the Ptolemies and reconquer the territories of Asia Minor, annexed by Pergamon, which Antiochus III the Great would carry out. Antiochus III would seize Soel, Syria. So there's these 2 brothers, Seleucus and Antiochus, but afterwards be drawn away to deal with revolts in the east. Okay, this is exactly what the prophecy says. Now we go to the next one. It says, the king of the south shall be moved with bitterness, and shall come forth to fight with him, the king of the north, and shall establish a great company, but the king shall be given into his hand. So what's happening is that the king of the north is going to put down these rebellions and come back. And by this time, the king of the south has raised a great army to try to fight him, but he's raised this great army that is being ruled by a governor of basically the Levant, and that governor is going to switch teams and turn over to the other side because he's out of favor with the court in Egypt. And so it says, notice it says he's going to come to fight with him. He will establish a great company, but the company will be given into his hand, the king of the north's hand, okay? So the king of the north just got basically a huge part of the king of the south's army to defect to him. And so when he has taken away the company, his heart shall be lifted up, and he shall cast down myriads, but shall not prevail. So this guy is going to have a robust campaign and conquer a lot, and that's why he's going to get the title Antiochus III is going to be Antiochus the Great. This is Antiochus Epiphanes' father, but he ultimately fails and dies with his kingdom starting to fall apart. Okay, so the king of the north shall raise a great company greater than the former, and shall return after a few years with a great army and much wealth. So what he's going to do, well, he's going to go through all these conquest throughout basically repeat the conquest of Alexander to put down all these rebellions and subdue all these cities and plunder all this wealth from them. So he says, he shall return after a few years with a great army and much wealth, and in those days many shall revolt against the king of the south, and even the violent ones of your people shall themselves revolt in order to establish the vision, but they will fail. So this is Theodosius, the Ptolemaic governor of Soel, Syria, basically pushes Antiochus III out at first in 221, but by 219, so he would have to leave to handle a revolt in Media. It's not like he has to leave, but basically the guy withstood him. And then in 219 he returns, and Theodotus, who had become unpopular in the Ptolemaic court, would rebel against the Ptolemies and bring the province's armies and much of the Ptolemaic fleet with him. And this would lead to revolts against Ptolemaic rule in the Levant, including Judea. So that's where he says, even the violent ones of your people shall themselves revolt in order to establish the vision, but they will fail. So these guys see this as like, ooh, this is the liberation of the Jews. This is the end of the time of the Gentiles. So even in the generation before the Maccabees, you see this kind of violent self-fulfilling of the prophecies among the Jews already being stirred up among them. So the king of the north shall come and cast a mound to take the most fortified cities, and the army of the south shall not endure, nor be able to remain. Rather, he that comes against him shall do as he pleases, and none shall stand before him. He shall stand in the glorious land, which is the promised land, which by his hand it shall be consumed. He shall set his sights on conquering the whole kingdom and the upright ones with him. So the whole kingdom means the whole kingdom of Alexander, okay? So, Antiochus sees his early gains in Syria nullified when he's defeated in 217 at the Battle of Raphia, but then he has continued success in the existing province of the empire, putting down revolts in Anatolia and Sardis, Sophony, invading Parthia and occupying its capital, winning the Battle of Mount Labus in Hyrcania, thus causing the Parthian king to sue for peace. So Parthia is eventually going to be its own empire, but he's subdued them. Then he defeats the king of Bactria, securing a marriage alliance with that king Eudemus, so he gets him to submit to him and secures the marriage alliance. Then he follows Alexander's path through Afghanistan into India, renewing peace with the Indian king Sophogenesis of the Mauryan Empire, and securing more war elephants along with additional treasure. He would then lead an expedition down the Persian Gulf into Arabia, earning himself the title the Great, in which he would push against and liberate Judea from the Ptolemies and make a pact with Philip V of Macedon to divide their kingdom. So let's see if we can find Antiochus V or Antiochus III. So if you get a map like this, you see these arrows, these arrows. This is the campaign he goes on, essentially. He's all up in here. Oh, that's Alexander's empire. Sorry. So it doesn't look like I'm able to find a great map of his campaign, but essentially Antiochus, if you see all this purple, these are all people that had been rebelling against his kingdom, and he goes and puts them all down, and he does this whole route, comes around the Persian Gulf, and then he seems to come up into, all the way down here. Persia's going to have a some sites that I think they're going to take, and then he comes up into Palestine. He's got war elephants and all this other stuff, and he basically takes Palestine. So he says Antiochus would always be friendly with Jews, keeping their taxes low and letting them live and practice their religion in peace. So this is Antiochus Epiphanes' father, okay? According to Josephus, the Jews would also rebel, expelling Ptolemaic forces from Jerusalem and helping Antiochus take Acre, being rewarded with freedom for taxes and religious liberty. Defeating the Ptolemaic commander Scopas to liberate Judea from their rule, he would advance into Asia Minor. He would settle 2,000 Jewish families from Babylon in Lydia to Phrygia, okay? So these are Jews who are not rebellious. They're actually part of his dominion who are subservient to him, and they get resettled up in Lydia and Phrygia, okay? It says, however, he would eventually be pushed back by the Romans, forcing him to feign willingness to make peace with the Ptolemies. As a result, he would betroth his 8-year-old daughter, Cleopatra, to 14-year-old Ptolemy. The two would marry when she's just 10 years old. So let's see what the prophecy says. Prophecy says, okay, remember, it says, he shall set his sights on conquering the whole kingdom and the upright ones with him. So the upright ones who are with him are, you have noticed the violent ones of your people set up here. The violent ones of your people are the people who are trying to revolt against the Ptolemies. The upright ones are the people who are submitted to their Gentile rulers. So this is a major theme throughout the Gentile captivity, that the Jews are meant to be submitted to their Gentile overlords, okay? So the upright ones are the ones who are submitted to Ptolemy, and they end up being with him when he goes and conquers Anatolia and resettles them there. But then he gets basically forced to be subdued by the Romans, and the Romans get him to back out of Western Anatolia, and he backs out and he cedes that territory to them, okay, or to these Greek kings that are basically under their protection. And as a result, he tries to make peace with the Ptolemies, and the way he does it is by giving his 8-year-old daughter, he betroths her and then has her married when she's just 10 years old, okay? So this is why it says he shall give his daughter to wife, corrupting her, but she shall not remain at his side or before him. So what does this mean? It means this is a little girl who he arranges at age 8, and she marries this guy at age 10. And the point is she is a plant by him. So he corrupts her. This is the term for pederasty or pedophilia. He corrupts her in order to use her to basically get the Ptolemies to back off of him. Okay, and that's exactly what she does. Okay, so Antioch would offer the conquered soul Syria to Ptolemy as a dowry with his 10-year-old daughter, but would not remove his troops. Thus Ptolemy, so I think this is Ptolemy the 5th or 6th, would raise an army to retake the territories. When Ptolemy would die in 180, Cleopatra, his daughter, would place her infant son on the throne. So now by this time she's in her 20s, I think, and take the role of regent. She would cancel Ptolemy's plans to retake Syria. So what she does is basically puts her son on the throne after her husband's dead, and basically backs off his plans to fight for the territory that was her dowry, and that makes sure her father got to keep it. Okay, so that's why she's not remaining at his side or being for him. She's actually still serving her father's interests, because she's just a 10-year-old when she's given up in marriage. Okay, so he corrupted her by subduing her to pedophilia, basically. So then it says he shall, he shall turn his attention to the coastlands, seizing many, but a commander would cause his reproach to cease and turn the reproach upon himself. Then he shall set his sights on the stronghold of his own land, but be overthrown and fall and be no more. So this is the further explanation of the main thing where it says, that his heart shall be lifted up, and he shall cast down myriads, but he shall not prevail. All of this stuff is the conquest of Antiochus Epiphanes' dad. So he becomes Antiochus the Great. He has all these great victories. He conquers and subdues all these people. But at the end, his heart is lifted up because of this army that turned over the side of him, and he keeps reaching for more, and he eventually loses most of it. So even though he stirs up his kingdom to this much, he's going to go after these isles here. This is the coastlands he goes after up in Greece, and he's ultimately going to pull the Romans out to defend their allies, if you will, among the Greeks, and that's going to get him to back off, and by the time he dies, his territories are falling apart. So what he ends up doing, it says, after refusing to give Cleopatra's dowry, Antiochus would invade Greece, becoming commander of the Aetolian League in 192, which is basically a league of Greek city-states, so like a confederacy. He would continue to press on Roman allies, with Hannibal of Carthage encouraging him. After defeating Hannibal, the Romans would rout his 10,000-man army at Thermopylae, forcing them to withdraw. The Roman commander Scipio Asiaticus would then invade Anatolia, seizing Asia Minor. In 188, he would sign the Treaty of Apamea, abandoning most of Anatolia, and then he would launch an expedition against Persia, but be killed pillaging the temple at Elymas in 187. So he essentially goes to plunder another Persian temple after a revolt. He's trying to save face, because remember, he's accomplished all this stuff, but it all ends up failing by the end of his life. He's given up his 10-year-old daughter in marriage to try to secure something. He's maintained some of the territories, but he's lost some of the territories, and he's not looking so great by the end of his life, and he ultimately dies while pillaging a temple. Okay? So he has a great career, but he falls in a massive way by the end. So it says, then a raiser of taxes shall arise in his estate. This is before Antiochus, but remember, Antiochus is this guy's son, okay? But he will be destroyed within a few days, neither in rage nor in battle. So it says Antiochus' son, Seleucus IV, would raise taxes to maintain his empire, reversing his father's policy of leniency towards the Jews, sending Heliodorus to plunder their temple. Now remember, his father died while plundering a Persian temple. Now he's sending this guy Heliodorus to plunder the Jewish temple. And this whole story is in 2 Maccabees about how he sends this guy to plunder the temple. And this temple has like billions in gold sitting there because the Jews have been collecting all this gold for the temple treasury and the feeding of widows and orphans since the days of the Persians. And they've been left alone in their temple for the most part. And then under their father, they had no taxes. So it's because the priest is the government. It's basically they're collecting taxes but paying no tribute to the Greeks for a generation. So they have a lot of money stashed up. And when Antiochus' son Seleucus IV tries to go take this, he's sending his guy Heliodorus. According to the Jews, he tries to go get it, and an angel of the Lord comes and beats the crap out of him. That's the Jewish story. Whatever happens, though, he ends up going back and assassinates Seleucus. So that's how he dies, neither in rage nor in battle. He sends his tax collector go who did it. His tax collector apparently gets his butt kicked by the Lord, or something happens, and then he goes and kills him and takes over rule himself as like the steward of Gondor. Okay. Then a vile person shall arise in a state, whom they shall not give the glory of the kingdom, but rather he shall come in stealthily and seize it by treachery. This is Antiochus Epiphanes. So after Heliodorus would seize the throne, he would rule as a steward, placing the 5-year-old son of Seleucus, also named Antiochus, on the throne, as Seleucus' other son Demetrius would remain a hostage in Rome as part of the Treaty of Apamea. So remember, their father signed this treaty with the Romans, and as part of that treaty, he had to keep his son, who was supposed to be the heir, with the Romans, so that to assure compliance basically to the treaty. Okay. Well, he doesn't. He starts out with Antiochus as that son. That's Antiochus Epiphanes, and then he trades him off for Demetrius, who was appointed to be the heir. Antiochus was not, so that's why they have Demetrius. Antiochus is basically the uncle of the son who's ruling, because it's Demetrius' son who's on the throne, the 5-year-old. Remember, it's the son of the brother who got assassinated. Okay. So Antiochus is his uncle, and he basically says he'll co-rule with this guy and help him, his 5-year-old brother, rule, and essentially deposes Heliodorus, who's the steward, and basically makes himself the steward, but then has his nephew, they believe he had him killed, and that's how he gets the throne. He doesn't get the throne by legitimate inheritance. He seems to offer to help his 5-year-old nephew co-rule, and then has him murdered. Okay? So this is Antiochus coming in and seizing it by treachery. And he has him killed in 170. The Ptolemies believe he had him murdered, and so they're going to go to war with him immediately. They don't trust these guys. Antiochus Epiphanes is ready for this, though. So it says, with a flood of armies, all before him will be overwhelmed and crushed, yea, even the prince of the covenant. So the prince of the covenant is probably the high priest. So it says, after a covenant made with him, he shall act treacherously, arising to become powerful with a small nation. So I've interpreted this in the past to say that this small nation is the Jews helping the Antichrist come to power. I don't believe that is the case anymore. Because when I look at this, I see the nation of the Seleucids is on decline. They're losing a lot of their territory in the east. Their territory in Syria is basically becoming their main stronghold. They've lost Western Anatolia, so they are a small nation now. But what they do is it says with a flood of his armies, all before him will be overwhelmed and crushed. He goes in and pours into the Levant. He then deposes the high priest. That's the prince of the covenant. And then it says, after a covenant made with him, so he is going to basically get bribed by the next guy to be the high priest of Judea. He shall act treacherously, and that's how he gets rid of the one high priest and gets another in his place. And he arises to become powerful with a small nation. Okay? So whatever's going on with the Jews and him, remember, the Jews fell out of disfavor in the days of his brother. They were in favor in the days of his father. Now the Jews are jockeying for position within his kingdom, and somebody bribes him. Remember, he's looking for money for his troops and stuff like this, and somebody bribes him to overthrow the priest. So there's the prince of the covenant, and then get it in his place. So it says, he shall enter stealthily into the richest places of the province, and shall do what his fathers could not, nor his fathers' fathers, and shall scatter among them the booty and the spoil and the riches. Yea, he shall even plans against the stronghold for a time. He shall stir up his vigor against the king of the south, and the king of the south shall be stirred up to battle with a large and powerful army. But he shall not endure, for they shall contrive plans against him. They that eat at the portion of his food shall destroy him, and his army shall be overwhelmed, and many shall be fallen slain. So the history we have on this is not great, but what we know is this. Antiochus is going to pour a bunch of troops into the Levant, which, remember, was Seleucid territory and supposedly the dowry of Cleopatra back in the day. This is an earlier Cleopatra. And then they never really gave it to him. So the Egyptians want this, and now they know Antiochus has illegitimately claimed the throne, so they see this as the opportune time to go get it. But Antiochus knows they're coming, and so he piles up these troops up in western Egypt, and he's going to get ready to pounce on these armies as soon as they come out of Egypt. And he does. He kicks their butt. Then he goes in and takes over all of Egypt with the exception of Alexandria, plunders it, and then he is known for literally just giving away money to people and throwing money out in the streets after that. So he basically just plunders all of Egypt, which none of his fathers could do. He says he shall enter stealthily into the richest places of the province and do what his fathers could not. So what he does is all through trickery and treachery. He does this. He also seems to be bribing the officials of Ptolemy to back down or not do anything, and he basically takes over all of Egypt. So that's why it says that those that eat the portion of his food shall destroy him. We don't know if this is by incompetence or actual treachery and bribery, but essentially his governors and administrators seem to completely fail Ptolemy. And so he takes Ptolemy and basically keeps him as king, but he's kind of as like a puppet king under watch. And then Antiochus is going to prepare to invade and take Alexandria, which is in eastern Egypt, which is basically their main richest port city and their trade point with the Greeks and the Romans, okay? So he's going to take this, but he knows if he tries to take this, he's going to probably end up at war with the Romans. So he takes all of Egypt but this, plunders the money, starts throwing money around, giving money away to people. And this is what he's doing that his fathers could not. Okay, this is Antiochus Epiphanes. Now it says in 171, Antiochus would amass his armies in the Levant and would take a bribe to depose the high priest Jason and replace him with Menelaus. Now all this stuff is going to be in the Maccabees writings, okay? Despite the many eastern provinces breaking away steadily after the death of his father Antiochus the Great, he would rally armies around Egypt, and at the declaration of war by Ptolemy VI to retake Soal Syria, he would crush Egypt's armies, invade all of Egypt, seizing all of Alexandria, as Rome was busy with the Macedonian campaign. So they're actually in the process right now of conquering the Macedonian chunk of Alexander's empire. That's why they're not helping the Egyptians. They couldn't afford to intervene, and he would be known for showering cities of Syria with coins and giving gifts to random strangers. Okay? So then it says, and both of these kings' hearts shall be after wickedness, and they shall speak lies at the same table, but they shall not prosper, for the end is at appointed time. So here's what's going on. What we're witnessing here is the transition of the Romans preparing to take all of this. They're starting to get Alexander's eastern portions of his empire now. Within less than a century, they're going to get both the Ptolemies and the Seleucid empires, okay, with the exception of what the Parthians take. But these guys are both sitting at the table with one another, and they're kind of frenemies, and they're both plotting against the other one. But the point is they don't see their end coming. And so what he's saying is they shall speak lies at the same table, but they shall not prosper, for the end is at appointed time. The end is the end of their kingdom for the Romans. Remember, this fourth kingdom is foreordained, okay? So God has already been telling Daniel that this fourth kingdom after the Greeks is coming. This is now the introduction of them. And it doesn't name them the Romans. Now, I theoretically think the reason it doesn't name them the Romans is because maybe God doesn't decide that the Romans are going to be this kingdom yet. Maybe it's between them and Carthage, and God's just like, which one should be the fourth kingdom? Because they're never named. That could be it, but we know where they come from. That is foreordained, because whoever it is going to send in ships from Kittim, which is basically Cyprus. Now, you could argue that the Kittim were in Rome already, and so this is a way of saying the people who were in Rome before that. And you might be right, okay? But this is what happens. Antiochus keeps Ptolemy as a puppet king in Egypt while planning a siege against Alexandria to complete its conquest. Both kings are ambitious of regaining Alexander's kingdom, but they would fail due to God's plan to exalt Rome over them both. In 168, he would launch his second campaign in Egypt and a fleet to seize Cyprus, but before reaching Alexandria, the Roman ambassador would deliver a message to Antiochus to withdraw on threat of war with Rome. When Antiochus said he would discuss it with council, the envoy drew a circle around him, demanding an answer before he moved. He basically draws a circle around him and says, if you leave this circle without giving me an answer, you are at war with Rome. His capitulation would signal the rapid decline of his dominion and the hegemony of Rome in the region. He basically bowed down to Rome. Okay? So he's trying to consolidate Alexander's empire, and Rome punked him out completely, and this signals the rise of Rome over the Greeks. Okay? Before, yes, Rome has got him to back down, but this kind of thing happens. Rome's still fighting Carthage at the time. They're not so supreme yet. Now they've beat Carthage. Now they've beat Macedonia, and now they've told Antiochus, if you don't get out of Egypt now, we're coming to get you. Okay? So, knowing this, Alexander is like, he didn't really want Alexander anyways. He didn't want to fight Rome. What he wanted to do is have as much of Alexander's empire as he can and all these riches. So he's got this. While he's there, a rumor starts to circulate among the Jews that he's been killed. Because of this rumor, Jason, the priest who he took a bribe to have overthrown, is going to launch a surprise attack on Jerusalem, forcing Menelaus out of office. In response, Antiochus would kill thousands of Jews in Jerusalem. So this is not the abomination of desolation, but you could argue that this is. He imposes Hellenization on them. That includes slaughtering a pig on the altar, so this is outside the temple, forcing them to eat pig in all these different offerings and sacrifices all over the land, and offering sacrifices to the Greek gods in their towns, and outlawing circumcision on the pain of death. So it is a foretype of the abomination of desolation. It does not qualify for the abomination of desolation because we don't know of Antiochus putting a statue of Zeus in the Holy of Holies. There's nothing written about that. What you have is Antiochus slaughtering a pig on the altar and setting an idol to Zeus on the altar outside the temple. Okay? It is close to the abomination of desolation, but it's not it. Okay? So then he would return to Syria. He would never again enter Jerusalem. And this is where the prophecy has to stop being about him, because he never again enters into the region after that. He goes and deals with stuff in the east, and he eventually dies. Okay? So this would lead to the Maccabean revolt, which would ultimately be cemented by an alliance with Rome. The Maccabees would entreat with Rome right away while they're fighting this guerrilla campaign. And Rome was like, yeah, we'll be your allies, and they don't offer them any help. But what Rome does is when you sign up to be an ally with Rome, you're eventually going to be conquered by Rome. That's basically what's going to happen. Okay? So Rome says, yeah, we'll be your allies. We'll conquer you when it's convenient, is what they mean. We'll set up bases to be your allies, and we'll eventually take over your territory too. Okay? So they have a 7-year guerrilla war, and you see all this is mirroring Daniel's 70th week. This is why these Maccabees are going to be like, they don't understand Daniel's 70 weeks prophecy. All they know is that they have succeeded in rebelling against this guy who has kind of desolated Jerusalem and desolated the land and done all these sacrileges. And they're defeating him over a 7-year period. This is how long this has taken place. So this looks like to them Daniel's 70 weeks, okay? But remember, we've already read earlier in the prophecy that the violent of your people will try to fulfill the vision, but they'll fail, okay? So we know that there's this contingent of Jews who are trying to self-fulfill this prophecy already a generation before this, and it's probably their sons or grandsons that are actually doing this, okay? So after the 7-year guerrilla war, the Hasmonean dynasty would form as a result. The Seleucid dynasty would face revolts in the east as the Parthians would rise to contend with them, and their declining dominion would end in 63 BCE. So it's about a century later that they actually disappear, the Seleucids dynasty, when the Romans would just finally just annex their territory. They'll just claim it for themselves, because basically most of their territory in the east becomes the Parthian Empire. The Romans take most of their territory in the west. The Jews basically gain liberation from them, and eventually the Romans are like, we got their back, and so they never get it back. And the Jews are basically living independently under the Hasmoneans for about a century, I think a century and a half, close to, before the Herods come in. Okay? So then it says, now this is why we know this is no longer about Antiochus, because it says he will act against it and return to his own land, which Antiochus does. Now, at the appointed time, he shall return. Antiochus never returned, so this can't be about Antiochus. This is one like Antiochus. This is the one of whom Antiochus is the foretype. So remember, this idea of a little horn coming out of one of these four kingdoms is already present in Daniel's first prophecy, which is Daniel 8 or Daniel 7, Daniel 8. So the four beasts, the he-goat and the ram, the little horn is there coming out of one of Alexander's four empires. And now we know from Daniel 9 that the people of the prince that come, who destroy the city and the sanctuary, are also from the region of Antiochus. Okay? They all come from this region between Turkey and Syria. That's what we know, okay? So if I have to guess, and it's actually in Turkey where it is. It's on the border of Turkey, which is where Turkey is currently overflowing Turkey's borders and starting to take over parts of Syria. I believe Turkey's fulfilling the prophecy right now, and the Antichrist is eventually going to come from there. And he's probably going to be a descendant of Antiochus and also a descendant of Dan. That would be my guess. So anyways, he says, at the appointed time, he shall return and come towards the south, but it will not be like the former, Antiochus III, or as the latter, Antiochus Epiphanes. These are the two guys who go down there, overflow the river, and try to fight the Ptolemies. Okay? So he shall return as the Antichrist, but it will not be like Antiochus III, who comes in and takes all this territory and then dies, or Antiochus Epiphanes, who comes in and takes Egypt and then gets punked by the Romans. It's not going to be like either one of these guys. And then it says, for the ships of Kittim shall come against him, therefore he shall become despondent and return and become indignant towards the Holy Covenant. So this is where you have dual fulfillment involved, okay? And it doesn't really make a lot of sense because we know he pillages Egypt and then goes back towards his own land. But once he acts against the Holy Covenant, against the Jews, he doesn't come back to Judea after that. So this is where the prophecy stops matching history. But here's where you have a double entente here. The term the Holy Covenant this is the only place it's used in the Old Testament. Moses' covenant is never called the Holy Covenant in the whole Old Testament. The Holy Covenant is only referenced once in the New Covenant, and that's John the Baptist's father specifically prophesying and referring to the covenant that was made to Abraham, which is the basis for the New Covenant, okay? So this is a double entente that is meant to be like, this is kind of about Antiochus here, but it doesn't quite match. And he is doing this stuff towards the Jews who kind of have a covenant, but it is really about what he does towards the Christians in the last days. So when you see at the appointed time he shall return and come towards the south, this is about what we've seen about the Antichrist, the little horn, who goes south and east and towards the beautiful land. So he's coming down out of Turkey, he's taking over Syria, and then he's overflowing the banks of the Euphrates, and he's going into Israel, and then he's going to go down into Egypt. And this is what we're going to read here. So he says, for the ships of Kittim shall come against him, and this could be a last days alliance against the Antichrist, and therefore he becomes despondent, returns, and becomes indignant towards the Holy Covenant, and those that act wickedly against the covenant he shall corrupt with flattery, and the people that know their God shall be mighty and advance. Okay? So the dual fulfillment is this. The people that know their God, you could say, are the Maccabees, because they're trying to keep the law. The people that act wickedly against the covenant are the Hellenistic Jews, who he's corrupting, and he's actually is supporting them against the other Jews. Okay? So this is somewhat Antiochus, but it doesn't quite match Antiochus. So this is where we need to look for a dual fulfillment. So here's where the deeds of Antiochus and Antichrist begin to overlap, as Antiochus would make 2 campaigns in Egypt, that's important, and be rebuffed by threats of the Roman navy, but the remainder of the prophecies cannot be attributed to him or any of his heirs. Okay? So what is going on? We have this weird place where it almost like this overlaps with stuff that definitely is Antiochus, but doesn't match the timing. And then it doesn't match him at all. So we see Antiochus would attempt to retake Judea after the Maccabean revolt, but being taken up with a Parthian revolt, he would split his kingdom and block his trade to India. A Parthian revolt that would split his kingdom and block his trade to India, he would not personally lead the army into Sol, Syria. So he doesn't go into the Levant, okay? As he and his father had done. Instead, he sends his commanders, Apollinarius, Saron, Lysias, Gorgias, Nicanor, Bacchides, who would all lose to the Maccabees between 167 and 160. So they keep sending these people, these other generals, not him, in his place, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and it doesn't work out. None of these generals work out. They all lose to the Maccabees over this 7-year period due to their persistent guerrilla tactics. Hanukkah would be established to commemorate the 7 to 8 years of living in tents and fighting guerrilla warfare. That's why Hanukkah has, it's like 7 or 8 days to it. The whole thing about the menorah and the lighting of the candle for the 8 days of menorah, it's not about that. It's about the 8 years that they're spending in tents, okay? Due to the attacks on Jewish Hellenists and collaborators with Antioch, Acre would be set up as a fortress to host the Hellenized Jews, okay? So he is kind of helping them out with flatterers or whatever. After being rebuffed by Rome, he would return to Syria and be taken up with the Parthian revolt for the rest of his life. He never returns to Judea. He would lead his main army against Parthia and succeed in capturing King Mithridates, but would die in his return at Isfahan in 164 BC. So we don't know how he dies, but we have multiple Jewish claims that he died by the hand of God in 2 different ways. So one says that he is struck down by God dying of disease. Another says he drowned himself in the sea and committed suicide. So we got 2 different stories. So the Jews are making stuff up. So we don't know what's true. What we do know is that he dies of unknown circumstances after trying to take over after trying to take over Judea and doing all this desolating stuff. And so they're trying to claim that this is the fulfillment of Daniel's abomination of desolation, which it is a partial type fulfillment, but not the complete. Okay? So now this stuff is definitely about Antichrist. This is not about him. And it says, the king shall act as he pleases, and he shall exalt himself and magnify himself against God until the indignation is accomplished. The indignation is another key phrase that you want to look for in Daniel. So if you look up indignation, it's actually quite a bit in the Bible, but it's specifically in Daniel 8. Behold, I will make thee know that what will be in the last end of the indignation for the appointed time it shall be. And so notice he's talking about Media and Persia and then the Greeks. And the indignation is specifically talking about him causing craft to prosper in his hand, and he will magnify himself in his heart, and by peace destroy many, and he shall stand up against the prince of princes, but he shall be broken without hand. Okay, this is why the Jews in the Maccabean period want to make this about Antiochus, because he was broken without hand, right? We don't know how he died, so it must have been God that did it. Okay, but this is about the Antichrist. And the indignation is mentioned in Isaiah, Jeremiah, and Daniel, so we know this is something that God does in the last days. For that which is predestined shall be accomplished. Neither shall he regard the God of his fathers, nor the desire of women, nor regard any God, for he shall exalt them himself above them all. So this is how I interpret this. The God of his fathers is obviously, he doesn't worship any Greek God, any Muslim God, any God that previously existed. He does not regard the desire of women. What is the desire of women that he does not regard? That is giving birth to his heir. So if he had any woman married to him, that woman would want to give birth to his heir. That is the desire of woman, okay? So he does not regard the God of his fathers, nor the desire of women, nor any God. Okay, this is important. He doesn't regard any God, okay? But it's going to talk about him honoring a God later. For he shall exalt himself above them all. So notice he says this. He does not regard any God. Rather, in his estate he shall give honor to the God of strongholds, and shall honor a God whom his fathers never knew. So here it says he does not regard any God. He exalts himself above them all, but then he honors this God of strongholds and a God who his fathers never knew. There's 2 gods, okay? So he says, with gold and silver and with precious stones and with pleasant things, so shall he advance against the mightiest strongholds, increasing in glory with the help of a strange God, so that's the God his fathers never knew, whom he will acknowledge, and he will cause them, that's the God of strongholds and the God his fathers never knew, to rule over the multitude and divide the land for gain. So I used to think it was him causing the Jews, the small people, to rule over many, but it's not. It's these 2 gods, the God of strongholds and the God his fathers not knew. That's the them he causes to rule over many. So who is the God of strongholds and the gods his fathers didn't know? That is the dragon and the image of the beast. Those are the 2 gods, okay? So it's important. How does he do this? In his estate. While he's alive, he doesn't honor any God, okay? When he dies in his estate, he honors these 2 gods. So who's going to rule now? The God of strongholds, and I'm going to show you how that's Satan, and the God his fathers not knew, that's the image of the beast. That's the fake resurrection of him in the image of the beast, okay? He doesn't honor any God, but in his estate he honors them, Okay? After he dies, he gives them the honor of his estate. So he says, so he shall advance, and then it says he will rule over a multitude and divide the land for gain. So he is somehow going to accomplish the division of the land of Israel with the help of this strange God. Notice it says, increasing in glory with the help of a strange God whom he will acknowledge, and he will cause them, these two gods, to rule over the multitude and to divide the land for gain. So whatever he's doing, I believe it's going to have to do with AI, parceling out the earth and trying to come up with a balance of power that works for everybody. But the ultimate ruler, remember who they give honor to after the Antichrist is dead, is going to be the dragon and the beast. And it's not the living beast, it's the image of the beast. So they're worshiping the image of the beast, that's the unknown God, and the dragon who gives them his power and authority, that's the God of strongholds. So here's the thing. This Antiochus, this Antichrist, will exalt himself against the Most High in the abomination of desolation. That's him not honoring any God. To accomplish the prophesied indignation. He will not regard his traditional faith, so whether he's a Jew or Muslim, whoever he is, he won't, or his heir, so that's the desire of women, so he is not going to try to have an heir succeed him, because he wants to be worshipped as God forever after he's dead, or any traditional faith, exalting himself above all things, not interested in leaving an inheritance to an heir, supposing himself to live forever. He will instead leave his estate to two gods, one being the God of stronghold, which seems based on the smithing god, who is traditionally accounted as creating the other gods in Egypt. He's known as Ptah. To the Greeks, he's known as Hephaestus, based on Japheth. He's known as Prometheus to the, I think, the Romans. And he's known as Tubal-Cain to the ancient Bible. He's the original smithing god, who basically justified the war and the overthrow of the dominion of Enosh and Seth and the line of priests down to Noah. Okay? So all of these guys, the Promethean god is based on Satan, because he is this god who is known for giving you the forbidden wisdom that allows you to advance civilization. And he becomes known as this god of architecture and smithing, aka the architect of the universe. That's who Ptah is, and that is the god of the Freemasons. Okay? So notice he's a god of strongholds. So this architect of the universe is understood that this is Satan. This is Lucifer, who they serve. Okay? And he is considered the Promethean god who gave you the forbidden knowledge that the other gods didn't want you to have. And he helped you advance your technology. That's what he's all about. Okay? So all of these gods that are worshipped in the ancient world are attributable to the deeds of Satan themselves, because they're always merging them with different people, okay? And he's depicted in giving men sacred knowledge against the will of the other gods. This god is acknowledged in Freemasonry, the medieval fortress builder cult that built the medieval castles and churches of Catholic Europe, and the Knights Templar. Their god is known as the Great Architect of the Universe, which is exactly the title of Ptah. Or the demiurge in Gnosticism. So demiurge means, in the Bible, it actually means master technician, or public technician. Basically, it's like a maintenance guy for the city of Jerusalem. That's demiurgos. But that's how they get the architect of the universe, okay? The second god is the one that helps him to advance against the national defenses of the strongest nations, making him supreme in dominion. This god, who we acknowledge publicly, will be left his dominion after his son. Thus he will give his dominion of the earth to two gods, the dragon in the image of the beast, who is an AI counterfeit resurrection based in his own likeness. That's who this is, okay? Now, again, this is not the easiest thing to see until you get to the book of Revelation, and then you start analyzing it with modern history, and it makes sense, okay? But he says, at the time of the end, the king of the south shall arise and push against him. So I used to think there's the king of the south and the king of the north, and then the Antichrist here. I now know it better in the Hebrew, and it's just the king of the south and the king of the north. So the Antichrist is the new king of the north. He is much like Antiochus. He's going to come from the same place as Antiochus and enter in the Middle East, and then he's going to invade Egypt. And so it says, at the end, the king of the south will arise against him, and the king of the north will come against him like a whirlwind with chariots and horses and many ships. He shall enter into the lands and overflow and pass over the Euphrates. That's overflowing and pass over. Is the same phrase that happens with Antiochus the Great, okay? That's the Euphrates River he's overflowing and passing over. So it's important, because you're seeing Turkey right now start to take that space between the Tigris and the Euphrates River, and they're eventually going to pour over it, okay? He shall enter into the glorious land, so that's the promised land, and many shall be overthrown, but these shall escape his hand, Edom and Moab and the children of Ammon, so essentially Jordan. He shall stretch forth his hand over the countries, and the land of Egypt shall not escape. He shall have power over the treasures of gold and silver and all the precious things of Egypt, which I say is the Suez Canal. That's their main source of wealth, especially when their river dries up. And the Libyans and the Cushites shall be in his train. So essentially they are basically subdued by him. They need him to connect with the rest of the world, essentially, and trade, because they can't trade with Europe without him. Now, what I suspect is at this time he's going to have the NATO navies backing him up. I used to think that the King of the North might be launching an assault against him, and that is possible. But now that I think that he is the King of the North, I'm not sure if that's the case. Okay, so I might revise my book in the future. But the point is, as I'm reading this more carefully, and I know the history of Antiochus more carefully, it seems like he does pretty much what Antiochus does. He does almost exactly what Antiochus does, except he comes in and takes over all Egypt, gets their treasures like Antiochus does, and then goes up and commits the abomination of desolation like Antiochus does. He seems to almost identically mimic the campaign of Antiochus. The difference is he's over a world government when he does it. So, after the Gog-Magog invasion, Russia and North Korea will be subdued, likely along with Iran, but their African rivals, or their African allies, I should say, may still be a threat to the security of the Middle East. That's probably what his excuses for going down into Egypt. So remember, all this is going to be in the aftermath of the Gog-Magog war being over. We know Gog and Magog is going to get nuked, so they're going to be subdued. Iran's going to get treated with, and they're going to be probably subdued. But you have this king of the south. You have their allies that compose of southern African forces that are on their side, okay? And this is who he's going down to subdue in Daniel's 70th week. So they're a threat to the security of the Middle East, particularly in relation to Egypt and North African ports on the Mediterranean Red Sea. They need to control all this for trade to flow and everything to be based around this kingdom of the Antichrist, okay? So after moving south and east from Turkey and the land between the Tigris and the Euphrates, the land of Syria and the gate of Nimrod, so this is all in Micah 5. This is what happens after this war. He will pour his troops across the Euphrates towards the beautiful land, entering into western Syria, Lebanon, and Israel, but he's leaving Jordan unmolested. In other words, he's not going to invade Jordan, okay? He will then occupy Egypt on the pretense of securing it against aggression from these allies, but will remain in control of the Suez Canal and the sea routes of the Mediterranean Red Sea, forcing both sub-Saharan Africa and Libya, the Lubim. This is who this is. This is Libya, Libya is not in the Magog invasion, but they are people who he is going to have subdued, it seems like. Thus removing Chinese influence from Africa. So he's basically blacked out China from being able to trade in the Mediterranean. Unless they're going all the way around Africa, which is a lot more expensive and they can't compete, okay? But reports out of the east and the north will trouble him. These are the kings of the east. So he will go out of Egypt with rage to utterly destroy multitudes. He will plant his pavilion between the sea, so that's the Mediterranean, and the glorious holy mountain. So he's in the Gaza plain between the Mediterranean and the Jerusalem. And he shall come to his end, and none shall help him. Now where he's going to plant his pavilion, shout out to John Brisson, is the land and the territory that Trump has been talking about annexing, and Jared Kushner's talking about building up in terms of real estate, and Benjamin Netanyahu is now saying they're going to clear out and totally take control of. That is ultimately where the Antichrist seems to have his base before he does the abomination of desolation. Knowing that, he does seem to like he has to come from Turkey. The location of where he seems to come from seems to have to be Turkey. I can't work this out with the Donald Trump scenario, okay? But he does go into the Gaza plain, and so it seems like he's got NATO on his back. It seems like he's basically the front man of all of NATO at this point, okay? So basically, this is after realizing that China is planning all-out war against his new stronghold, he sets up a base camp in the Gaza plain, preparing for advance of these armies from the northeast. The kings of the east, during this time, he will enter in the city of Jerusalem and sit in its temple, claiming to be their Messiah and God after killing 2 witnesses, and promoting a 3-day celebration over their corpses. This is all in Revelation 11. He will claim that he defeated the Antichrist and false prophet, thus proving himself to be their Messiah, and after 3 days, the 2 witnesses will be resurrected and raptured after Christ appears in the clouds in a flash of lightning, which will strike down and destroy the Antichrist. This is in Zechariah, I think Zechariah 9. Thus he will come to his end with no one helping him. So this is all in Revelation 11, okay? At that time, so now we're back on Daniel 12 now, okay? At that time, Michael the great prince that stands over the children of Israel shall arise, and there shall be a time of trouble, since there has not been since the beginning of the nation to that time. And at that time, in the end, your people shall be delivered, everyone found written in the book. So this is shorthand for what Jesus says in Matthew 24, okay? There's going to be a time of trouble since there was a nation at that time. So we're seeing from the point of the abomination desolation, and Michael the great prince that stands over the children of Israel shall arise, okay? So what is he doing? He's rising up to cast Satan out of heaven. This great tribulation happens. That's when the Antichrist is revealed, when he's casting Satan out of heaven. Satan gets thrown down like a bolt of lightning. Christ is saying in Zechariah 9 that he shoots lightning like arrows. It says in 2 Thessalonians that the Antichrist is destroyed by the brightness of his coming. So I believe the Antichrist Satan is thrown down at the Antichrist, and he's the bolt of lightning that kills him at the word of the Lord. I think that's how it happens. So it says, many of them who sleep in the dust shall awake, some to everlasting life and some to everlasting shame and contempt. So they truncate the whole period between here and the second resurrection at the end of the millennium. And basically are saying this is when the resurrection of the dead and the rapture happen. Yet the wise shall shine like brightness in the firmament, and they that turn many to righteousness like the stars forever and ever. Okay? So the wicked are going to rise later to shame and contempt, but the wise are rising right now to shine as brightness in the firmament. They're going to be resurrected. They're going to glow like Jesus in the Mount of Transfiguration, and they're going to be caught up into the heavens, and they're going to shine like brightness in the firmament and like the stars forever and ever. Okay? We become like Christ in the resurrection. So it's the wise. So notice he's distinguishing between two people, the wise and those who shine like or the wise and your people. Okay? Now, if we go back up here to Antichrist, or to Antiochus, when it talks generically about the Holy Covenant and then the people that know their God shall be mighty in advance, this is talking about the dual fulfillment. It's going to be the Maccabean revolt and then the Christians who know their God, okay? These are the wise who turn many to righteous. They're going to produce and advance. Okay, they're going to advance the kingdom of God by discipling and leading people to Christ and maybe dying for their faith and stuff like this. Okay, so he says, "They that turn many to righteousness like the stars forever and ever, they'll get their glorification and the resurrection for their righteous works done under Christ." Okay. At this point of the rapture, the first resurrection will begin. The resurrected saints will shine like the stars, as Christ's transfiguration, to be caught up in the firmament like shooting stars, being taken to the New Jerusalem, which will be somewhere in the sky at the time. But you, O Daniel, shut up the words in the book until the future, and at the end, when many people go back and forth, knowledge of the book will be increased. That's what I believe it's saying, okay? When human beings are sharing information back and forth, archaeological information, historical information, interpretive information, or church history, all this stuff, then the knowledge of the book of Daniel will be increased and we'll understand, okay? Well, when are they going to and fro and back and forth? You could say, well, that's today with the internet and travel. Or you could say that's when the gospel is evangelized and they start going all over to preach the gospel, because that's when the book of Revelation is written, okay? So I think that probably has like kind of a double entente to it, because that's when the book of Revelation is basically Daniel unsealed, okay? So Daniel's told that the book is not meant to be understood until a time when the people go to and fro. This is likely a reference to the spreading of the gospel, which the New Testament ends with the book of Revelation, saying, do not seal the book, okay? Daniel's saying, shut up and seal the book. Revelation says, do not seal the book, okay? Also, the era of ingrafting the Gentiles is frequently referred to as the end, and most of Daniel was understood in the early church. However, it is also like a reference to the modern age and the spread of information internationally that allows us to understand the fulfillment of these prophecies and what yet remains to be fulfilled. So I believe that has a dual intent to it. Now, it says, then I, Daniel, looked, and behold, two others stood. So remember, he's been led up to the rapture. There's nothing after the rapture that has been explained to him in this prophecy yet. There has in other prophecies, and so he has reference points that they're going to mention. But nothing in this prophecy has led you beyond the midpoint of the tribulation, okay? We've been led to the death of the Antichrist at the abomination of desolation, but even the abomination of desolation has not been described in this prophecy yet, okay? but it has been in multiple other prophecies. I think 2 of them. Okay. So this is what he says. He says, "Then I, Daniel, look, and behold, 2 others stood." So there's at least 3 people in this. There's the first angel, possibly a second man who made him stand up, but it might be the same guy. Now he says 2 others stood, one on this side of the bank of the river, one on that side of the bank of the river. And one said to the man clothed in fine linen. So it does look like the man clothed in fine linen, this angelic being, is the only man there, okay? He says, "How long until the end of these wonders?" So again, everything he just described, how long until the end of this, okay? Now this is important because the last prophecy just led him up to the 69 weeks until Messiah, and then he talked about after that, the 70th week and the covenant made, okay? So there's something important going on there. It also talks about how he acts wickedly against the prince of the covenant, but again, in that context, it was clearly the priest, the high priest that he was acting against, okay? Well, he says, "How long till the end of these wonders? And I heard the man clothed in linen, which was upon the waters of the river." So he's standing in the middle of the river. These guys are on either side, and they're asking him how long, and he holds up his right hand and left to heaven and swears by him who lives for eternity that it'll be for a time, and half a times. So everything he just described leading up to this midpoint, he said is going to be for a time, and half a time. And the way I hold that to is when he says, "And when he shall return," that's the beginning of the 3.5 years. So that's the return of Antiochus. That's the Antichrist, okay? When he shall return is the beginning of that to the end times, okay? So they talk about the time of the end, okay? So he says it'll be a times and a half. So we know these are 360-day periods. So we're looking at 1,260 days, the exact amount of time that is in Daniel 11 for the 2 witnesses, okay? "And when the king of the north will have accomplished to scatter the power of the holy people, all these things shall be finished." So what happens in Daniel 11 after those 1,260 days? Well, we see the 2 witnesses resurrected and raptured, the Jews fleeing Jerusalem in Daniel 12. That signified the abomination of desolation being set up in Daniel 13. The remainder of the saints who are not raptured, killed, implied in 14, definitely shown in chapter 15, and then the bowls are going to be poured out from 16 onward, okay? So that midpoint, which is going to be section, it starts in 10 when an angel gets up and mimics this. He holds up one hand and he says, he swears to heaven by him who lives forever, okay? So he's going to hold up one hand, and all of a sudden we're like, that's attaching these 2 things. And then he's going to tell him he's going to prophesy again, and he's going to prophesy for a period that is this times and a half, okay? So Daniel 10, what he's announcing the beginning of, which occurs in Daniel 11 till the 7th trumpet is blown, is this 3.5-year period, okay? Then, when he's accomplished to scatter the power of the holy people, that's the righteous Jews fleeing Jerusalem at the abomination of desolation. It's also the Christians being killed for not taking the mark of the beast. So then Daniel overhears the 2 angels asking the Son of Man when the miracles will happen. He says 3.5 time, which are 360 days according to Daniel 9. So that is 1,200 and 320 days, 3.5. I don't know how that works out, but it's 1,260 days total, okay? So this is Daniel 11. This is the period of Daniel 11. Then he says, "And I heard, but did not understand. Then I said, O my Lord, what will be the result of these things?" So he'll say, what is the end of these things? But what he means is the terminus or the end, the result, okay? And he says, "Go your way, Daniel, for the words are closed up and sealed until the time of the end." In other words, it's none of your business, okay? "Many shall be purified and made white and tried, but the wicked shall act wickedly, and none of the wicked shall understand. But the wise," there's those people who will be raptured, "will understand." So the wise are the people that will be raptured, and he's saying the people that will be raptured will understand this prophecy. Okay? Not trying to toot my own horn, but it's us. I'm just kidding. If we are wise and we're serving the Lord, he's saying he'll give us the understanding of this prophecy. I believe he is giving us the understanding of this prophecy. I believe he's giving us the understanding that this lines up with Revelation 11. It also lines up with the Mid-Trib rapture. We are going to be watching and waiting when he says to watch and wait, based on the signs he says to watch and wait for, okay? We're not date setting, but we're watching and waiting for the signs, and we're checking the schedule, okay? That's what we're doing. And so we're busy about the Lord's work while we're here, but we're watching the signs and checking the schedule in the meantime, and that makes us the wise, okay? The wise are busy about the Lord's work, turning many to righteousness, okay? And from the time the daily sacrifice is taken away and the abomination that causes desolation is set up, now we're at that midpoint again, are 1,290 days. That's after this. So it's 1,260 days up to this, 1,290 days after this, okay? So there is some period after these 7 360-day periods. There's at least 30 days after it, okay? We're still within 7 literal years, but we're post 7 360-day periods at this last month, okay? What's going on here? What is this? That is the outpouring of the Lord's wrath. And the last bowl is the Lord touching down on Jerusalem, which causes the mountain to split and all this stuff. And we read about him leading the remnant of the Jews to Basra, fighting in Basra. He's going to then protect all these Jews and make them safe. And then he's going to go up and he's going to capture the image of the beast and throw them into the lake of fire. Then he's going to go up to Armageddon. He's going to fight these other armies and he's going to lay them waste with his breath. But all of this seems to take place over the course of 45 days. Okay? He has some greetings to give to people. Blessed is he that waits and reaches 1,330 days. So notice we go 1,330. That's 40 days later. Okay? I think it's 30 days. I might have missed. Let me double check that. 5 and 30 days. So 1,335 days. So it's 45 days later. Christ's campaign is over. And what does he do at the end of that campaign? Thrones are going to be set up, and he is going to resurrect the remainder of the dead who didn't take the mark of the beast. That's why he said, blessed is he who waits and reaches 1,335 days. Now, there's two forms of waiting. Either you didn't take the mark of the beast and you're dead, but your soul's in heaven, or you were faithful and fled from Jerusalem and you've actually physically survived, okay? Remember, this is about Daniel's people. So the wise they're referring to are the Christians who aren't revealed yet. The ones who are blessed who wait are those Jews who managed to survive the tribulation because they ran and fled in the wilderness like they were supposed to. Okay? So it says, but go your way until the end. Remember, he says, what is the end of these things? What is the result of these things? And he says, sealed till the time of the end, until the end, for you shall rest and stand in your lot in the end of days. Okay? He's literally talking about Daniel being resurrected to stand in his allotted territory as one of the tribes of Judah. Okay? And we're going to cover all that when we go into Ezekiel 40 through 48, because that's what this is leading up to. You have nothing about the millennium in Daniel. You have almost nothing about the 70th week in Ezekiel. But you put the two together and you have everything. Okay? So, Daniel's told that the wise, the ones who are raptured, will understand the prophecy again, but those who endure in the faith until 1,390 days will also be blessed, including those who refuse the mark and the Jews in the wilderness. This marks the end of the first resurrection, which Daniel is promised a part in. So this takes you up to the first resurrection in Revelation 20, entering into the millennium. Okay? So everything here is an expansion on the prophecies before it, but they all essentially cover this same period. They go from the ancient past either to the Roman kingdom or the Greek kingdom, and then they jump forward into Daniel's 70th week. Every single one of them does this. And then they take you up to the point of the millennium, but they don't take you into the millennium, okay? So that's it. That's all of Daniel's prophecy. So, again, if you guys have questions or challenges this, I would love to hear them. Again, I'm still learning new things as I grow in my understanding of Greek and Hebrew and history and stuff like this. So don't think because you've heard it from me, this is locked in and I'll never get better at this. I'll never improve or anyone can't correct me, okay? But what I'm going to say to you, in terms of people who are in the comment section, people like to jump on here, and this is a common thing. They'll be like, here's a guy who knows a bunch of stuff. Let me go correct him about 10 things. And they literally don't know how to engage with somebody. They don't know how to Q&A. They don't know how to ask, why do you believe that? They just say, you're wrong because here's the truth. You're wrong because here's the truth. And they just give a bunch of comments like this, okay? That's ignorant. I can meet 1,000 people a day who do stuff like this. That's ignorant. If you have a problem with something I'm saying, ask a question or put a counter proposition in front with the evidence. Don't just say you're wrong because here's what's right, okay? It's annoying. It's a waste of my time. I'm studying things. I'm trying to do the best I can with stuff, and I am open to being improved upon, but not in that way. It is unproductive, and it's usually a waste of time, and usually if you do that, you're wrong because you don't know why you believe what you believe, and you don't know why I believe what I believe, and all you just want to do is tell me what you've heard and what you've chosen to believe. Okay? That's not productive. We're going from the scripture, we're going from the Greek and the Hebrew, we're going from the history, we're putting that information and we're saying, maybe you're wrong because it's this. Have you considered this? Why do you think this? What is your proof text for this? What is your reason for this? And that helps us get closer to the truth. But we're not doing denominational sword fighting where one guy says tastes great and the other guy says less filling, and we just lob counter assertions at each other without evidence, okay? Or we don't challenge or engage with the evidence that the other person's putting forward, okay? I'm not going to waste time with this. If you're doing this within a day of dealing with it, I'm going to tell you what you're doing and I don't want to deal with it, okay? That's not me being rude. That's not me being proud. That's not me being impatient. I just don't want to waste time. There is no idea that I have heard in my comment section that is novel to me that I've never heard before. It almost 0 times happens. Maybe like 1 out of 100 might be like, oh, I actually have never heard that before. Okay? I've heard them all before. I've been doing this for a while. Okay? Trust me when I say I'm doing the best that I can and I'm listening to as many people as I can. Don't assume you're showing up to me with new information about the Bible or especially about prophecy that I've never heard before. If you show up in my comment section and you're like, you're totally wrong, dude, I'm just like, anything else? Okay, you're an idiot. Okay, I don't need to hear that. That's not helpful to me. That's not helpful to anybody else who's listening. That's not helpful to the body of Christ, okay? This isn't, my comment section is not a place for you to wag your pride, okay? Be productive. Say something contributory or say something that is productive in terms of challenging what I am saying, or just shut up and listen. Like, I'm not trying to prove anything to anyone here, okay? I'm trying to just do the best I can and share what I got. So, hope you guys are blessed by this. Again, we're going to pick up next time in in Ezekiel 40 through 48, and then we're going in the temple period, but I will do my best to keep reiterating points that we made because we're going to show how these things get collaborated by Ezekiel, by Zechariah especially, a little bit by Haggai, but not much. And then Malachi is going to close the old covenant and put them in anticipation of the coming of Christ for the next main thing, okay? So I hope you guys are blessed by this. You have a great rest of your week. Batman out. Peace.
Peace, I'm out. I'm Batman.